Hello, my dear viewers. This amazing story will be very instructive for you. It is very interesting and beautiful. I wish you enjoy watching it.
Lily sat at the table with her friend. May was spreading out the tarot cards, looking intently, as if she understood what they were telling her. Lily didn't believe it all, but at least it was better than another discussion about May having the wealthy lover. Lily was very jealous of her friend, and very often their relationship ended indefinitely because Lily could not stand the heat of passion. She really wanted the kind of life that May had. Affluent men, gifts, trips, vacations in exotic countries. Lily would give a lot to return to such a life, not to care about anything and just enjoy every day. "Well, what do your cards say?" Lily asked, taking a sip of wine. Her thin glass shimmered in the sunlight. Lily stared at that wine, thinking that she couldn't even drink properly now. She couldn't do anything at all now because she had a family and a small child. "Nothing good," May said, shaking her head negatively. She took her glass too, leaned back in her chair, and looked at her friend. "How do you think my life will turn out?" May asked, turning to Lily. "If you never marry, your life will turn out just fine," Lily said grudgingly. "Why aren't you happy?" May asked. "And where is their happiness from childhood? I was told that there is happiness to be a wife, the happiness of motherhood. And what I get in the end is just an endless pile of problems that no one solves but me. I am very tired. I do not want anything else, but I can only hope for myself. I have a perpetually sick child. I have a lazy husband who is not included in family life at all. I have a mother who can't stand me, and I have endless debts that I have to go into just to survive, while my hubby pretends to be a strong shoulder," Lily said. May looked at her in surprise, but then just shrugged. Lily realized that she didn't believe it, or maybe, like everyone else around her, just blamed her for it. That was the way it was in our society. It was always the woman's fault, always the mother's fault. Lily was tired of explaining. She didn't want to prove anything more. Let things be the way they were. She would manage on her own somehow. She was very tired. Her head was buzzing. A couple of sips of wine did nothing to improve the situation. The only thing that could improve the situation was a divorce. Lily loved her daughter very much, but she couldn't stand the family life anymore. She wanted to divorce her husband, but she was afraid she wouldn't be able to get out of this situation alone. She was on maternity leave, and at work she wasn't really welcome back. "But so, what did the cards say?" Lily asked, taking another sip. "They say you're in for trouble, long loneliness, pain, tears. And I also see that you're trying to change your life, but you'll regret it later," May said. "Throw them away or burn them," Lily said calmly. "It's all kindergarten. So tired, so tired." Lily looked out the window, where moms were sitting, looking at their children, and apparently they were filled with happiness. It was the happiness of motherhood in those smiling faces. Lily herself realized that apparently she was not adapted to children and motherhood in general. She wanted to return to her old life, where she was left to herself. Who would have thought that the most ordinary, simple, mundane things would be her reward? She wanted to lie around again when she felt like watching movies, TV shows, going to work, dressing up, visiting beauty salons. But instead, she turned into a tool, a robot who has to do laundry, cook, take care of the child, listen to her husband's discontent. "Is it really that bad?" May asked, shuffling the deck. "Yesterday he came home and said that he wanted me to look the way I used to. Can you imagine? He wants a pre-pregnant figure. And he also wants me who had the time and money for beauty salons, fitness, proper nutrition. Now the only thing I can do is eat some sandwich I saw on the table and grab before my baby woke up," she said. "It's strange, when we get together as a group, he looks like a normal father," May said. "Yes, he tries to be a normal father, but only if someone is looking at him. If he has to show some behavior, he's easy to adjust. But at home he lies on the couch all day long, reproaching me that other moms have time and look good, and I do not have time for anything. Except that other moms at least someone helps or they have a calmer child. These if there can be just a million." Lily was indignant. May put her hand on her shoulder. May felt she sympathized with her, but not too much. Lily was annoyed when she talked about her family, about her husband, and that irritability was contagious. Lily had just gotten a job at her husband's insistence. It was hard for her to cope with the idea that she now had to work a shift at work, and then at home at the stove and with the baby. Lily's tears welled up at the fact that she had trapped herself into this trap. But it seemed to her that she was doing the right thing, that she, like all women, wants a family, children, trying to do everything to make her husband happy. But the more often Lily stopped and thought about her own life, the more she realized that she herself in her life is simply not. Never get married, never, Lily repeated. They all pretend to be good, kind, and then it's midnight and the husband is an asshole. That's it. That's the whole beautiful Cinderella story. You know, if I could have a time machine, I'd go back and never get involved with him. I'd live for myself, work, travel, and never get involved in this whole nightmare we're served under the sauce that we should and must conform to this standard of living. May didn't answer her, and Lily realized that she had probably said too much, though she didn't regret it. She realized that at least she should open her friend's eyes, because everyone around her would be singing how wonderful and wonderful it was. Well, Lily didn't see it as wonderful except for a disfigured life. Oh, it's all useless. You won't listen to me anyway. I never listened to anyone either. I thought that I would be different. I would be a perfect wife. I would meet all my husband's demands in general. He would be proud of me. How idiotic it sounds now, to spend your whole life fitting in with a man who will never appreciate it, Lily said. When she got into the cab to go home, she was already late. Her husband had only let her go for 2 hours and in that time had called her more than 10 times to come back because the baby was crying. He couldn't get along with his daughter and every time she cried, even if Lily was in the shower at the time, he would throw a tantrum and start drumming. Lily got out of the cab. Very much she wanted to just stay here. Sit by the driveway, buy some low-quality pie, just eat it alone in silence. If she went up as soon as the door opened, her whole life would once again become a nightmare that she endured with great difficulty. How she wished she could turn back time, go back to a time when she was calm and happy. But it was impossible. She had to accept that her life would never be the same again. Lily walked up the stairs, counting each step and just imagining that someday she would come up and there would only be the nanny and the baby and no one else. She did not want to lose her daughter, but she wanted to be without her husband who annoyed her, reprimanded her for every penny and literally abused her interests, and what interests she could have. Her whole life turned into one continuous marriage where there was no time for anything but cooking, taking care of the child and her husband, as if she had 2 children. Her husband was the youngest. What the hell? Fred exclaimed unhappily. He was holding a crying baby girl in his arms. The little girl held out her arms to her mother. Lily did not even have time to take off her outer clothes, immediately received the baby in her arms. The girl continued to cry, babbling something under her nose. "Did you feed her?" asked his wife. "No, in case I do something wrong," said Fred, shrugging his shoulders. "How convenient. You can say that about anything. In fact, you say it every time. It's called learned helplessness. Either pretend you don't know how to do it or do it badly so you'll never be asked to do it again," Lily said. Fred grimaced as if he'd been caught by the hand like a thief. "Your mother, it's actually your responsibility," he said grudgingly. "What are you saying? You've made yourself comfortable. Except that it's not like that. We are both parents. We both have equal responsibility and duties for the child. And that you are good, only pretending that you are engaged with the child. That's it. Leave me alone," Lily said. Fred decided to take a chance, grabbed his phone and hid in the bathroom, where he would probably sit for another hour. It was apparently his favorite place in the apartment, sitting there on his phone, so no one would touch him. Lily didn't understand his behavior. Why even start a family if you weren't willing to work at it? Why would you beg on your knees to have a baby if you have no interest in it? There were no answers to these questions. She realized that demanding responsibility from him was simply futile. She needed to muster up the courage, build up a safety cushion, and just leave him out of it. Lily fed her daughter, who immediately calmed down. She put the little girl to bed. She passed out almost immediately, apparently exhausted, crying, asking again and again for trivial food from her father, who was unable to dilute the formula. especially since the baby was already calmly eating baby food from glass jars. You take a jar from the refrigerator, warm it up a little, give it to the child. That's it. But apparently, for a grown man of 30 years old, this proved to be an impossible task. Apparently, all this could be compared to a flight into space. Too difficult, too hard, too unbearable. He's the father, the husband, the breadwinner. He brings money into the family that no one sees. Lily fed the baby, provided for the family on welfare and the paycheck she got. That's it. She did not see her husband's money at all, though she barely started a conversation about taking care of the child, as he immediately beat his fist in his chest and shouted that he was actually working, tired at work, but she was tired too. Apparently, however, no one took her tiredness into account. Lily stood by the crib, then went into the kitchen. She sat down on the table, rested her forehead against the cold glass. She didn't want anything at all anymore. Her entire mood had been destroyed. "You're sitting. You'd better do some cleaning," said the man, unhappily approaching the refrigerator. He took out a bottle of beer, opened it, took a few sips, and then, leaning back in his chair, stared at his wife. "You sit there with your girlfriend and that's it. Look at her. Right away, you start shaking your rights. I'm tired of talking to you. Leave me alone," Lily said calmly, realizing she couldn't say anything else. She was tired of explaining to him that she needed help, tired of explaining to this man that she was not ironclad, that she needed support and help. It was useless for him to speak. It was as if he was pretending not to hear or understand her. "Everyone is coping, and you're the poor thing. You see, she has a child, a job, household chores. That's the hard part." "It's hard. I can't stand it," Fred mocked her. "Well, if it's not hard at all, then after work you do the baby in the house, 1 day a week, just one, and see how you sing," she said. "I'm not doing woman stuff," Fred said grudgingly. "Then do some manly things," she said. "Drive the nail I've been asking you to drive for 2 months. Fix the washing machine. Fix the faucet. Get a handyman to do it all," she said grudgingly. "Yes, of course. And then you have to pay for the handyman. You can do it by hand," Fred said firmly. He waved goodbye to his wife, got up and went into the living room. The TV was on so loud that the baby woke up and screamed. At times like this, Lily just hated her husband, wanted to tear him apart. She didn't understand how he could be so cold, insensitive to this child. Lily was just ready to make him feel on his own skin that he was wrong. But apparently this man couldn't be made to do anything. He lived only in his own little world, listened only to himself, and did not want to worry about anything. He threw all his responsibility on his wife, insisted that it was her womanly duties, and Lily herself was tired of proving something to him. It was impossible to prove anything to a man who was so sure of his beliefs that he was ready to bump his horns to prove his position. "The family suffers, I don't care." What mattered was that he could prove his truth. A few days later, Lily was on her way to work. She had already called the babysitter, who was a few minutes late. Lily didn't worry much. She knew how important it was for this woman to show up to get some money. This was another mom on maternity leave who was coming to watch her baby girl along with her child. It was a perfect match. Lily could help another woman who was in the same situation as her, being dependent on a man who took advantage of it. Oh, and she herself could finally go to work where she earned money to feed her family and give away her many debts. "Go home and get some groceries," Fred said as he left the apartment. Lily did not answer him anything after all. He still would not understand. For him, apparently, it was too much. Now all the responsibilities were on Lily's shoulders: financial, physical, housework, taking care of the child, providing for the family. And the husband's life didn't change at all after the baby came. He just enjoyed life. Even now he could enjoy bullying his unhappy spouse. Lily went outside, got into her car and drove to work. She once again warmly remembered her father, who had given her a car, albeit a very inexpensive one, but a good and reliable one. When she entered the office, it was already full of people. Apparently there were some inspections again, because otherwise no one usually bothers so much. And no wonder everyone was running around like a stunned person. When Lily had found out that the main report was due today, she was now running around like crazy too. It wasn't until lunchtime, when all the major work was done, that there was silence. Lily sat at her desk, watching the people around her already calm down, just enjoying their lunch break. Goldman to the supervisor's office, the receptionist said as she walked out into the common room. Everyone looked at Lily awkwardly, then glanced at her. There were two choices. Either she was going to be promoted, knowing her efficiency, or she was going to be fired, implying that she could go on sick leave with the baby at any moment. But since Lily had come to work, she had never taken a sick day. She left the baby with the nanny and was on call anyway, but she never left work. Right now, it was very important to maintain financial independence, provide for her family, get out of debt. Yes, she was missing out on the most important moments in her young daughter's life right now, but she simply had no choice. Lily stood up and walked towards the supervisor's office. When she knocked, peeked inside, Andrew Freeman was flipping through some papers. He looked up, smiled with his hand, invited her in. "Sit down, we need to talk. I see you're doing very well. To be honest, I was very apprehensive when you decided to leave the maternity leave early. And here it turns out that you have retained all your working qualities and even went to further study. I'm glad, really, but I have a proposition for you," he said. Lily almost immediately realized that now would be some obscene proposal. But she did not even know whether to refuse now, because it was a very different money and she had to provide for her family. There was no hope for her husband. "I want to take you out on a date. We'll go to a restaurant, then maybe we'll stop by my place. Besides, if all goes well, I can guarantee you a quick promotion." "Good job. I'm sure you'll do a great job with all this. You've got a great track record." "Yes, and I'd be happy to have you in the position," said the boss. "If I fit all the parameters, if you like me so much, then why can't you just promote me? You're sure I can do it, but you want to test my other skills that have nothing to do with the job," she asked. Andrew Freeman shook his head uncertainly. Apparently, he expected that she would join the game, quickly agree, and he would get what he wanted, but she wasn't too enthusiastic, which hurt him quite noticeably. "I think we all know exactly what's going on. We're adults and life is complicated, so I hope you can understand. I just want to have a chance at a future. If I just ask you out, you'll say no. You'll say you're married, you have a kid. That way I won't get a date, and that way I'll have a chance to prove myself outside of work," he said with a smile. She remained silent. Lily realized he was right. Under other circumstances, she would have turned him down right away. Andrew Freeman was a good-looking man, interesting, well-read, but she was really married and didn't want to cross herself, because she realized that later she would never forgive herself for such behavior. "Do not answer now. Think for a day or two. Then come back and say whether you want to go on a date or not. In any case, if you change your mind during the date, you can just leave. Nothing will happen," he said. Lily walked out of his office, completely immersed in her own thoughts. It was hard to imagine that she had driven herself into this situation. She'd been studying, hoping to get a promotion, and now she was going to have to do something else for the promotion. At first, the idea had seemed awful, but now, as she sat at her desk in front of her computer, she seemed to want more. Maybe she should just be patient for one night, just make herself sit it out, go, do whatever he said, and then give her child a decent future. There was no hope for us anymore, and the longer she sat there, pondering, the more she thought about the fact that she wanted to go along with it after all. She put those thoughts off until tomorrow, or at least tonight, because it was hard to work and think about it at the same time. It was time to pack up. Everyone around her already wanted to go home. She wanted to be home herself, but only on one condition, that her husband wasn't there. She got into the car and drove home. Lily was still pondering whether she should have agreed to what her boss was offering her. On the one hand, there were moral principles. On the other hand, there was the desire to give her child the best future she could provide for him at all. But what if she couldn't get over herself? Would she regret later that she could provide her daughter with any kind of university? Would she regret that by the time her daughter came of age, she would have already bought her an apartment? No, of course, she would not regret it. But now she had to find the strength to transcend these many principles that made her feel absolutely broken. "Why are you so busy again?" Fred asked. He had just come from his own place, reeking of alcohol. Apparently, he decided to stop by his friend's house after work. They were all sitting there, complaining about their wives, drinking. None of them even thought about how hard it was for women. They didn't care. They had to sit and whine, pretend to be unhappy, weak, offended by life. It was their way, their own kind of happiness, to sit around and complain. There are a lot of problems at work. I don't know if I'll ever get through it, she said. Naturally, she wouldn't tell him all the details, and he probably wouldn't be interested at all. He was only interested in his friends, in the constant problems of his friends that he was solving. Something had happened at David's. Fred had gotten out of bed in the middle of the night, rushing to his friend's house to help him. Brad's car broke down. At all hours of the day and night, Fred flew to his friend's house to help. His own daughter has a high fever and needs an ambulance or a ride to the hospital. No way, let the mother handle that. He doesn't have to get involved. It's all woman's business. And so it was with just about everything. At first, Lily hated his friends, getting angry every time they came into their lives, and then she just took it all on herself because she was tired of asking. Right now, she didn't care at all if he was at his friend's house or not. What mattered was that she had to solve her own problems and decide to take a desperate step. Listen, some friends invited me into town. I was thinking we could go together. You don't want to, because you'll have to watch the baby there. But we'll leave them in the nursery and go to a restaurant and sit together. You won't have to watch the baby, he said. Lily looked at him in surprise. Did he understand something? Did he realize how hard it was for her? His suggestion was so unexpected that she was just a little taken out of the whole situation. I just know you won't let me go alone. If you let me go, then you'll eat my brains that you're here alone with the baby and I was having fun and my ex will be there. I don't want you to get all worked up about me being there with someone else. So let's just take it easy for a while, and it'll be good for me, and you'll get some rest, Fred said. Now she understood why he had suddenly decided to offer her this vacation, and it at least felt more like the truth. She nodded, agreed to this trip, and he immediately started calling someone, telling them they were coming. If only Lily had known how this trip would end, there was no way she would have agreed to go there. No way she would have gotten in the car with the baby. For now, she just thought that she would spend time with adults, talk, feel needed and important, and come home rested. Then she would think about what to do with the boss. In the meantime, she had to start packing. Listen, don't get too fancy. My friends will be there, and I don't want to show them that you pay for everything here like Mother Teresa. You better wire me some money to pay for you, or I'll be ashamed in front of my friends, said Fred. Ashamed in front of your friends, not in front of me, she asked, looking at Fred. I know now I need to tell you everything that has happened, but I would hold off as a doctor seeing your condition. I would like you to be kept in the dark. But you will have relatives coming to see you, and sooner or later one of them will blab. The doctor said, deciding that he was acting for the greater good. Where is my daughter? Asked Lily. Her eyes immediately began to close. Just 3 words and she was losing her strength. It was terribly hard for her. She couldn't open her mouth again to continue speaking. Your husband and daughter were killed in a traffic accident. You are in a serious condition. One could say that it is the truest miracle that you survived. I want you to rest. You will be visited, examined. I hope you can pull through, he said, putting his hand on her palm. Lily couldn't even cry. She fell into oblivion almost immediately. Then there were long treatments, rehabilitations. Every day, Lally woke up with the thought that she was left without her husband and her favorite daughter, saying goodbye to her forever. There would be no more of those games, the happy laughter, the nightly screams. She would give anything in the world to have it all back, to have her little girl by her side again. When Lily got out of the hospital, it turned out that she had been there for months. She could hardly walk on her own. She had to lean on a cane. At least she was no longer on crutches, and on that she could be glad. Lily realized that the longer she dragged on, the worse it would get. Her husband and child were already buried. All that was left was to arrive at the cemetery, to say goodbye to them, looking at the crosses or gravestones. She hailed a cab, drove there because she couldn't help but say goodbye to her daughter. She blamed everything on her husband, who had gotten behind the wheel, and she was sure he had knocked over a shot for courage since morning. He was the one who hadn't seen to it that he had caused the death of a little babe who just didn't know what an idiot her father was. Lily stepped outside the cemetery, walking to the very spot where her husband and little daughter were buried. Tears ran down her cheeks. The tiny grave, the kind words on the wreath. There were too few flowers here, too few. "I'm sorry, my baby," she said, tears flowing. Lily fell to her knees sobbing, laying down on that little mound of earth. She would never hug her again, never hold her in her arms again. She would never again hear that little voice, never again see that smiling face full of love for her mother. Lily didn't know how long she lay there hysterical. When she was home again in the same apartment, it turned out that her husband's and daughter's things were gone. Everything had been taken away. Most likely it was Fred's mother, who hated her and apparently decided to take revenge. In the end, Lily prayed that she would never see this woman again, who could easily harass her, accusing her of all her sins. Lily sat in an empty apartment, unable to believe that she was here all alone, without her beloved daughter, and the room where all her things were would now forever remain empty. Not even a few days after Lily was discharged from the hospital, her mother wrote to her and asked to meet her. Lily didn't want to see her, but she apparently had no choice. Nothing good could be expected from this meeting. Lily's mother had always been ultra-traditional, and that was often the reason for their fights. If earlier Lily had at least tried to defend her position, now she didn't see any point in it. Her mother would always have her own opinion, and trying to prove anything to her was always a stupid idea. And now going to meet her mother, it was expected that she would show herself in all her glory. "I knew you'd be late," Candy said. "I've been waiting here like an idiot, and seriously, I couldn't leave early enough." It was as if nothing had happened for Candy. Her daughter had just recently been in a car accident with her husband and young daughter, had buried her husband and young daughter, and was now barely able to stand on her own 2 feet. But apparently the mother didn't care. She didn't see anything wrong with helping and supporting her daughter. She once again just wanted to tell her off to make her feel right. "Mom, you should at least turn on the TV once in a while. There's a traffic jam downtown, so I'm stuck. 2 cars collided. The whole downtown is paralyzed," Lily said. She never got behind the wheel of her car after that accident. She couldn't bring herself to drive because she remembered how her husband had gotten behind the wheel after a couple of drinks for courage and then couldn't control himself. What if the accident could have been avoided then? What if her little daughter was alive then? These questions popped into her head every time she approached her car, but so far she traveled exclusively by cab. "You couldn't take a detour. But wait, you're so rich, you drive a cab," the old woman said in a disgruntled voice. "That's right, you buried your whole family and now you're happy. No responsibility." "Mom," shouted Lily, who couldn't take it anymore. Mom, and that mom could not keep the family, so all tormented, always complaining about her husband, and now that you will be a widow, no one will take you to marry. Her mother again objected in a disgruntled voice. 2 months ago, Lily became a widow, and her mother was still talking to her. Lily was tired of explaining things to her. This woman had only 2 kinds of opinions, her own and what she considered wrong, unnatural. Her mother was always on her own side and listened only to herself. "Who'll want you now as a widow? What a fool would marry the one who buried her husband? So you will be alone, you will look at your girlfriends, bite your elbows, that without a man left. You probably ate his brains out while you were driving, so he crashed just to shut you up. And God took your daughter from you. You didn't deserve it," the woman said sharply. Lily went out into the hallway. She began to pack and regretted 100 times that she had decided to go to her mother. She shouldn't have trusted this woman, shouldn't have believed her words that she threw around so easily. "Look at her," she took offense. "There's no offense to the truth," Candy shouted, her chin high and proud. "It's your own fault. Bad things don't happen to good people." Lily left her mother's apartment, walked quickly down the steps, away from the apartment building that had brought her so much pain and grief. She walked, feeling tears streaming down her cheeks, leaving stains on her light-colored scarf. She couldn't calm down even a little bit. Lily felt as if she couldn't make out the road because of the tears. She sat down on the bench, flooding with tears, unable to see or notice anything around her. The only thing she felt was a soul-tearing pain inside that made it hard to think. Lily looked up, a treacherously blue sky that looked cheerful, open. In weather like this, one should be happy for good news, sitting at home with her family. And she went to her mother's house hoping that because of such grief, her mother would take pity on her and not bully her, which she liked to do usually. Lily felt that this situation would teach her mother nothing. Still, the woman will continue to press her that the most important thing is to get married. Otherwise, you become a disgrace to the family. And even now, when Lily had just buried her husband and young daughter, her mother didn't care at all about her daughter's feelings. Candy was ashamed to admit in front of her friends and neighbors that, you see, her daughter was unmarried and she was ready to push her endlessly. Lily pulled out her cell phone, immediately sending her mother's number to a blacklist so she would never reach her again. The young woman slowly got up, wandered home on cotton legs. She didn't remember how she got there, entered the apartment, fell forward, and just stayed lying on the sofa. She still couldn't even sleep in her bedroom at night. Every corner of her apartment was a reminder of what had happened and the fact that there was nothing she could have prevented. Over and over again, she went back mentally to that time, that if she could have fixed anything, that if she could have stopped this disaster. But no, she did nothing, suspected nothing, just thought it would all go away. And then the impact, the headlights, the hospital, and the two graves. It was indifferent to her husband's death after all he'd said and done, but she couldn't forgive herself for being in a coma while her daughter was buried. The tears came up again like a lump in her throat, and she couldn't bring herself to calm down. But time passed. Time doesn't heal, but the feeling dulled, and gradually remembering the bitter past became easier. Lily was learning to move on with her life. She had gotten together with a man, but she couldn't even think about having other children. She already had a daughter. She didn't need another child. Good thing the man she had chosen to live with, more out of desperation, didn't want any children either and had no plans for her herself. When Lily came home, she felt that something was going on since the day she had been in the accident. She had a premonition of all the trouble that would happen in her life. And now when she went home, all her thoughts were filled with the fact that another trouble was about to happen, which would easily knock her out of her usual rhythm of life. "Why are you late?" asked Andrew. The same Andrew Freeman who had once been her boss was now living with her. She had been living in his apartment for 4 months now. After months of dating, she was just tired of being alone. And when he offered her to live together, she had only agreed to at least temporarily move out of the apartment to start making repairs there. There were too many heavy memories she couldn't cope with. But gradually the wallpaper, the furniture, the purpose of the rooms changed. Now instead of a bedroom was her full-fledged office, where she planned to move when she finished her studies and worked from home. The living room she had completely remodeled, and the nursery was now an empty room. She had planned to make a walk-in closet in there, but she couldn't bring herself to start renovations there. It was too hard to realize that she would just wipe the last memory of her daughter out of her head with this renovation. When Andrew spoke again, she almost didn't hear him, turned her head in his direction, staring dumbly, as if trying to remember what he said just a few seconds ago. "Anyway, I don't want to drag this conversation out too long. I think it's time you and I split up, especially since I've been thinking about it for days. I'm not rushing you. You can pack your things in a few days, but I don't want you here by Monday," Andrew said. "Why?" she asked. There was no hysteria, no sadness, no excitement in her question, just emptiness, nothing more. Maybe a few years ago she would have reacted differently, but now, after all she'd been through, she didn't care. If he was kicking her out, well, the hell with it. She didn't have to be with him all the time. He looked at her carefully, waiting for her reaction. Apparently, he was afraid that there would be a scandal, that she would talk him down. Instead of any emotion at all he saw was a blank stare, a shrug of the shoulders, a completely dumb question devoid of emotion. "I need a reason. I just want to know the reason," she repeated calmly, as if to let him know that whatever the reason, she wouldn't make a scene, wouldn't deal with him. "I just met someone else, I can't explain it to you, but it was like nothing I'd ever felt before. I don't want to lie to you. I want her to come instead of you," Andrew said. Maybe in any other situation, he would have kept silent and not told her everything he had just said. He would have saved her feelings. Maybe he wanted her to get a little stronger before he knew the truth. But he could see she wasn't feeling anything anymore. Decided to just give it away. "How long ago?" Lily asked. She immediately started putting her things in her suitcases. She wasn't going to stretch out packing for days. She didn't want to be alone with a man who meant nothing to her now. Almost as soon as you moved in, I thought it would pass, that I'd think later, that it was temporary, but it didn't, he said, shrugging. He talked about his cheating as if it were something mundane, simple, unimportant. Lily began to put her things away and he suddenly became nervous. He started to walk around her, but couldn't muster up the courage to talk. You don't understand, it just happened. It's just that I thought I could fix things, but it didn't work out. So I decided to come clean. I just thought it was hard enough for you already, and then there's me and my betrayal, he said. He was trying to absolve himself of responsibility, absolve himself of guilt. Apparently, he was trying to be a good boy to the end, so that no one would judge him for his decision. Except she didn't care anymore, or maybe he had doubts now, when he decided that instead of a good, understanding, malleable Lily, his stroppy mistress would come to the apartment, because the feelings for the mistress could quickly pass. But whether he would find someone who would be as good and comfortable with him as he had been with Lily, he doubted. It was a strange feeling, as if he were making a big mistake right now. Andrew, however, was in no hurry to change his mind. Lily, who was no longer going to sort anything out with him, didn't even ask anything. Her calmness turned him on even more. He suddenly thought that she had someone. Despite the fact that he had almost started cheating on her from the first day they started living together, he was suddenly filled with jealousy of her. He got so angry at the thought that someone could be around her at any given time that he immediately wanted her back. He had more of a sporting interest, and that interest constantly had to be piqued. Look, if you're not happy with something, you can tell me, we can talk, he said. It was as if he was leaving her room to choose. Well, Lily realized that he just wanted to absolve himself of responsibility. Let her make her own choices, and then he could say or decide later that it wasn't his choice. In the time they lived together, she already knew him like the back of her hand. He was exactly like that, completely indecisive, though quite strong in his work. The perfect boss, but a completely unfit partner for a relationship. Apparently, someone like Andrew needed a girl who would play the role of mommy. Then he'll be comfortable, they'll make decisions for him, and he'll just wait for the weather. So you have someone if you react so calmly, then you have someone, Andrew asked. Andrew was really exhausted while she was packing. He didn't expect her to be so calm. Lily had packed every last thing, even the underwear from the laundry that hadn't had time to dry. She stopped, turning to him only when she had already packed everything. He was just asking that stupid question. My life has changed dramatically over the past year. First, I hated my life, my husband, and then I buried him and my daughter. Then I began to hate my life even more. Time passed. Gradually, I put my life back in order. I thought that by getting back together with you, I would feel better. But you made it worse. So why should I regret leaving you? She pleaded. He was so unprepared to answer her question that he was now just staring at her dumbly, not sure how to respond to her words. How could he answer the question if he thought it was offensive? He thought she was fine with him, that he was sort of letting her be around him. Turns out she wasn't getting anything good from him. If you're so smart, then don't go to work. That's it. Now that you've decided to teach me a lesson, we'll see who's who, Andrew said. Lily didn't even react to this prank. She just went outside and loaded her suitcases into the car. Her back ached unpleasantly. Apparently the suitcases were unaccustomedly heavy. She got behind the wheel. Here her car drove again towards the apartment, where she hadn't been for a week. The renovations were completely finished, and when Lily walked in, she immediately felt better. Everything was different here. There were no heavy memories. She wasn't crying so much about her daughter anymore, and the only thing she was worried about now was that she didn't have a job, which meant she had to look for any options. Lily didn't want to go into the office again, to start her career all over again. She decided to choose something easier. Looking through the advertisements, she decided to get a job as a housekeeper. Almost immediately, she found a suitable vacancy, which was surprising. It turned out that housekeepers in rich houses were paid even more than she was paid in the office. However, she didn't want to start a new job. The longer she thought about it, the more she just wanted to spend time in the apartment. Lately, there was only one desire: to hide away from everyone so no one would see or notice her. Needing to pull herself out of this state by her hair, which she was going to do. If only Lily had known how this whole story would end, she probably would have thought many times before taking a job as a housekeeper in a rich house. For now, she was thinking that a new profession would help her distract herself after the tragedy. But who knew what would happen next? The next morning, she hailed herself a cab. She just wanted to get to her new place as soon as possible, where they promised to give her all the instructions to continue working more optimally. Lily wanted to perform well so she could linger in the new place. Any routine work was now preferable to sitting in the office brainstorming with her coworkers. "You're Lily?" the older woman asked, stepping outside. "Come with me, I'll show you around." The older woman led the way. She was short, thin, in a prim old dress. It was obvious that this woman was proud of her workplace and was not going to let any newcomer spoil her reputation as a house steward. It is forbidden to disturb the masters of the house, and it is forbidden to enter the master's wing without permission. As long as you're just starting here, you can only work on the first floor. The second floor is off limits. If you work at least a few months so that I see that you are worthy to go further, then we will talk," said the old woman. "It's almost a prison regime here," Lily grinned. "Jokes are not appropriate here, young lady," said the old woman. She went to the first floor and beckoned Lily's hand. The house was very richly decorated. It was immediately obvious that this rich decoration had been here 10 years ago. Apparently, whoever had purchased the mansion had decided to preserve the previous decorations. Lily looked around. "You can't touch the artwork. For the first time, you'll only do dishes in the kitchen and go into the dining room. I'll also give you tasks to dust, mop the floors. Everything on the first floor only. Gossiping is forbidden. Loud talking and laughing is forbidden. You must be practically invisible to the owners of the house if you want to stay here for a long time," said the old woman. "And who is it that sets such puritanical rules here?" asked Lily, who still did not understand why all this precaution was necessary. "I do," said the old woman sternly. "I was in this house long before the new owners came here. I will not allow loose morals to damage the reputation of this house. I don't know where they got the money to buy this mansion. I made it clear right away what the rules of the house were, and they fully agreed with them. The one little girl decided that she would have her own rules here." Lily flinched. She hadn't expected to hear about a small child. She felt uneasy. If she saw a little girl here, suddenly her heart wouldn't be able to take it. Suddenly she would be upset again. Somehow it made her sad that she was getting into a bad situation again, that she might lose her job again. "All right, I'm giving you all the instructions now. Change your clothes. Go straight to work. After that, you can start. Go to the main hall. I'll be right with you," said the old woman. But suddenly someone began to descend the stairs, and seeing her little daughter in the arms of her husband, Lily was speechless. Before she could think, her eyes immediately went black. She slumped backward, hitting her head painfully, but she didn't feel anything a second later because she had fallen into oblivion. When she next opened her eyes, there were white walls in front of her. A hospital. She immediately recognized that foul smell, that heavy aftertaste of medication she remembered from the day before. "How long have I been lying here?" Lethargic, barely opening her mouth, Lily asked. "A few hours, 6 hours to be exact. Apparently you've overworked yourself, overloaded your nervous system. After the stress you've been through, all you needed was rest. It's worth saving yourself some time. I recommend that you take a course," the woman started to say, but Lily interrupted her. "I'm not going through anything. Please leave me alone," Lily said. In front of her eyes was that very picture of her young daughter, all grown up but still recognizable. Who would have thought, after a terrible traffic accident, after burying her husband and daughter, came to get a job as a housekeeper in a rich house? She just fainted when she saw her husband alive, and most importantly, when she saw her little daughter there. Everything trembled inside from these memories. She did not believe herself. It was scary to believe what she had seen. Her voice shook as soon as she tried to say something. The only thing Lily was capable of was tears. They flowed in a river, forcing her to turn on her side. She cried, and the woman in the white coat sitting next to her, who actually turned out to be a doctor, patted her on the back. "I'll prescribe you a course of sedatives, but I recommend you see a therapist," the woman said and left the room. Lily was still sobbing. She couldn't believe how all this could have happened, how she could see her husband alive, although, on the other hand, she hadn't seen the funeral. No wonder she saw him alive, though she was at the grave. But now there was a hope in her soul that she was just afraid to believe. Lily stayed in the hospital for a few days. There was no way she could recover from what she had seen. She felt as if she had stepped into a swamp and could not get out of it. Thoughts of her daughter sucked her in more and more, and when suddenly a familiar head appeared in the room, peering out the door, Lily realized that it wasn't that simple. It was Audrey, Fred's sister. Could she have just come here after seeing Fred alive and well? Could she have come here just to sympathize with the unfortunate young woman? It wasn't like that at all. Lily knew that Audrey's heartfelt concern was to tell the truth. They wouldn't let me in. They said I'd only make things worse, Audrey said, shrugging her shoulders. But I think unless you know the truth, you're going to lose your mind sooner or later. I know you were in that house and that you saw Fred and your daughter alive. You weren't imagining things, and you're not going crazy. Lily opened her mouth, but she was sure that was it. Somewhere in the back of her mind, it was starting to feel like she was really losing her mind, but she forced herself back to that state of mind where only herself was worth trusting. She knew she had seen him and her own daughter. I know everything, and I promised to keep that secret. But he let me down. And if Fred let me down, if he thought I'd let it slide, it's not my fault. He wants to declare war on me, so I'm declaring war on him, Audrey said. The young woman in the hospital bed already realized that Audrey was not going to feel sorry for her brother. And if she wasn't going to feel sorry for him, then she was ready to give him up herself. Lily could not even imagine what made him set it all up and why he had taken her daughter away from her, even though he hardly ever took care of her. Audrey stood up and paced the room. She was quite nervous. A nurse who was passing by the room threatened her with her fist and pointed to a chair for her to sit down. Audrey smiled slightly, realized that she could easily be thrown out of here, and decided to obey, because she had no choice. She sat down again, but it was very hard for her to stay in one place. Your ex-husband, even though you think you buried him, really deserves some raw earth, Audrey said grudgingly. He told you almost nothing, didn't even give you any money. I know all that very well. The bastard made a deal with me. We have a very rich aunt, a woman of power, interesting, but she was already afflicted with a disease that was eating her brain. Fred went to see her, pretended to be a good grandnephew, all in secret from the family. When I found out, I was stunned. By then, the old woman didn't recognize anyone but him. He'd never once visited her willingly in his whole life. Only when she was already on her deathbed, he decided that it was the right time to show his kinship. Audrey was silent. It was visibly difficult for her to speak. She held back, took a deep breath, and then continued again. Anyway, I caught him by the tail and forced him to make a deal with me. I shielded him from the rest of the family, who would tear him to shreds if they found out he was sneakily seeking the huge inheritance. If he agrees to my terms, I get half of what he gets. Fred agreed, nodded, kept saying it would be just right. And guess what? He ended up running off with your girlfriend, Audrey said sharply. Lily opened her mouth in shock. She couldn't figure out where was the truth and where was the lie. How could her friend betray her? She didn't doubt her husband's talents, but her friend was everything to her. After all, when Lily was left practically alone, only her grumpy mother behind her. Only May had been her support, her backbone, her support. But May just disappeared after the accident. Said that she would go to work in another city and in general wanted to start life with a clean slate, including acquaintances and friends. Lily supported her then. They said goodbye for the last time, and it was all in the hospital, which Lily almost does not remember. And here it turns out that she is also a participant in the whole conspiracy. Lily did not understand anything, all the time thinking that she made a huge mistake, trusting this woman, trusting the man, having a child from him. Anyway, this one decided not just to run away, but to get rid of you and your daughter. He's an idiot, for God's sake. For some reason, he decided that in the divorce you will get half, although the inherited property is not divided. He decided to fake the accident at his own risk because he wanted to turn the car around so that you would be completely hit, just like the daughter on the other side. God, I'm saying this and I'm getting chills inside. He almost buried his wife and daughter alive so he wouldn't have to pay child support. That's a real man, Audrey said. Lily was even more shocked now. It took her quite some time before she was finally able to realize what had happened. Who was responsible for what had happened? She couldn't understand where she had missed the most important thing, because in fact she had noticed her husband's strange behavior for a long time. Maybe she could understand all this and prevent the disaster. The most important thing is that her daughter was alive, and she will definitely try to get her back. But his plan failed. I don't know how miraculously you survived. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad it didn't work out and that you and your daughter are okay. But that was his plan. I'm glad he screwed up. You were traumatized, but you survived. And after months in the hospital, when he decided to have a funeral, bribed the doctors, you came out and saw the gravestones. In the meantime, he bought himself a car, new papers, moved into his grandmother's house. I take it by some idiotic coincidence you got a job there, Audrey asked. Yes, but how do you know all that? Lily asked. A pig will find dirt everywhere. I always get the information I need. I don't know how this information will help you, but I want you to be aware of it. If that idiot decides to declare war on me, then let him wallow in his own filth, Audrey said. If you think he's all good and inherited and won't be punished for what he did to you, you're wrong. I'll strip him of everything, and you'll see. Why did he take his daughter? Lily asked. He never took care of her, never got up at night, never changed her diaper. Why would he? I don't know. Maybe he was just afraid that she was living proof of his plan that didn't happen. I don't know. He just took her and left. You can say hello to your girlfriend. Idiots move in so close. If he'd sold the house, gone to the edge of the country, I'd never have found him there, and neither would you, Audrey said in a disgruntled voice. Well, what's done is done. I've got my own things to do. If I need your help, I'll call you. And take care of yourself. That idiot isn't worth a single drop of your nerve. It's a shame we share the same blood. Audrey stood up, adjusted the flowers in the vase she'd brought, pulled a few bars of the white chocolate Lily adored out of her bag. She said goodbye to her, apologizing once again for confessing everything to her, and that she would have to live with it all now. Lily lay on the bed for a long time, unable to put two and two together in her head. Nothing was adding up. It was hard to believe that the man she loved had just set her up to be hit by a speeding car. As soon as Lily left the hospital, she immediately got ready to drive to that very house. She knew that the old woman would obviously not be happy to see her. The sacred silence of that house would be broken. Lily wasn't going to find out quietly. She would make him confess everything. But to go at once, Lily could not. She had been at home in bed for over a week, trying to recover. Money was running out. There was no one to help her, so she had to borrow. However, every time she borrowed money, she felt humiliated. But there came a day when Lily had finally come to her senses. She went downstairs, walked to her car. She was going to drive. It would be a fresh start for her. She was shaking. She realized that her daughter had survived, but she still remembered how hurt and scared she had been. With a titanic effort, Lily forced herself behind the wheel, overcoming the terrible fear that was bubbling up somewhere inside, forcing her to push herself over the edge. When she got behind the wheel, she wrapped both hands around it. She felt as if she had climbed Mount Everest. The sensation was unrepeatable. She had conquered her own fear. It was still raging inside, but it was much less intense. Lily adjusted the navigator and drove in the direction where the mansion was now. She drove out of town, past a few villages, and entered this large village. It must have once been the estate of this very rich lady who had been accosted by her now ex-husband, who she thought was dead. But now she saw a great many signs in all this. Why hadn't she noticed that her husband was acting suspiciously? Why hadn't she noticed that everything was falling out of her hands that day? Where were her eyes and sixth sense when she twisted her foot on the stairs as she walked down to the car? Fate was literally telling her not to drive anywhere, but she ignored all those warnings. When Lily pulled up outside the house, the first thing she saw was that very old woman. Her dark green dress looked well-maintained, but rather old. The old woman straightened up, fixed her dress with her hands, straightened her back, and slowly walked to the gate. You weren't invited today, and anyway, I don't think we need such sissies here, the old woman said, cocking her head high. Except Lily didn't care about her now. Lily literally pushed the old woman away and walked towards the house. The outraged old woman splayed her hands and followed her with a quick step. "This is simply outrageous. You have no right to be here. I'll call security," the older woman said, threatening with her index finger. "Call the presidential motorcade. I don't care," Lily said in a gruff voice as she rushed onto the floor. Apparently frightened by the scandal, employees began to come downstairs. But among all those faces, Lily saw May. Her friend was standing at the top of the stairs, holding her daughter in her arms. Little Chloe looked at her mother with round brown eyes, and she did not see her as her own person. She had been torn from her mother too soon. How old Chloe was then, not even a year old yet, and now she accepted as a mother a completely different woman. "May, how could you?" Lily asked in surprise, not understanding how her friend could take such a desperate step. "We've been friends hand in hand for so many years. You seriously think you're going to be happy with him? You only got involved with him for money. Why couldn't you just leave me alone with my daughter and just walk away? What the hell?" May was silent. It must have been hard for her to give an explanation, because even from the outside it looked terrible. It felt as if the whole thing had been set up to hurt Lily. May, on the other hand, saw it all as an attempt to keep herself, Fred, and the baby safe. Except that May thought caring for a baby was much easier, and being alone with a small child made her wish they had left the baby with her mother. "You were always complaining about him, and I could see he was a different person, saying he didn't need you. So I decided to take the opportunity, especially there is so much money here, that it will not seem little, and you will bite your elbows that you are left without money," said May. The girl started to get cranky. May immediately handed her to the nanny and started to walk slowly down the stairs. She looked too proud to walk otherwise. She tucked her chin in, slowly kicking her feet out, stepping onto the ancient staircase. "It's your own fault, you ruined a man. And now you suddenly think you can take it all back so easily, only it's not like that. I told him we shouldn't have gotten so close, that sooner or later everything would come out. He wasn't going to listen to me, but now we're all gonna have to deal with it. No one will believe you. We have other documents. No one will know you're right," May said. She was sure that no one would catch them by the hand. Lily couldn't believe that her friend, her closest friend, could turn out to be such a dangerous person for her, who decided to settle the matter in her own way. "I still don't understand what I did to hurt you," Lily asked. "How I deserved to be treated like this by you. You just didn't appreciate what you had. I dreamed of a husband, a child, good money. You got it all, and you didn't think you had enough. No, thanks. I didn't want to just watch it happen. I figured if you couldn't control yourself, I would. I just seduced your husband and led him to think that the matter could be handled very differently with you," May said. The fact that it was also her best friend's idea almost drove Lily crazy. She glared at her, yet May looked confident and composed and stubborn. She looked like someone who was ready to attack. When the door opened and Fred appeared upstairs, Lily was stunned. It was as if all the memories of being at his creative had merged in her mind. She suddenly remembered in part that accident, how he had swerved the steering wheel, putting her in front of the car. It made her so angry, but she didn't have the strength to pounce on him. May was still standing in front of him, but 2 meters away. Maybe she was afraid to come closer, or maybe she thought it was beneath her dignity. "I want you to leave this house. You're nobody here anymore, so go away. You can't prove anything. No one will listen to you. No one will believe you," May said. Lily looked up. Fred turned around rather abruptly and walked away. Even now, he was afraid to say anything to her, to confess, or even just to stand there, to be present for the conversation he was the perpetrator of. Lily realized it was useless. When the guards had already appeared in the hallway, she raised her hands, showing that she would leave on her own. The 2 stout men simply stood on either side of her. "Everything in this life boomerangs back, May. God be with you. It's not for me to judge you, but believe me, you'll regret it. Think about it. Because of your idea of getting rich, a woman and a small child you were holding in your arms almost died," Lily said. "They didn't die, and that's fine. There's no need to make a tragedy out of nothing," May said. Lily turned around and walked toward the exit. The men accompanied her, but she didn't care about them. She knew no one would do anything to her. It felt like everything around her was turning inside out. She didn't realize if she was in a dream or in real life. Who were all these people who were so intent on hurting her? What had she done? It was understandable that Fred had behaved perfectly with her. But sooner or later his rotten temper would come out. Someday May would regret that she decided to give up her friend just to please a man who wasn't worth it. And I doubt anyone in the world was worth the death of a mother and child. Lily got into the car. Her head was busy with thoughts. She kept going over and over in her head what she deserved such an attitude from the people close to her, of course. Now it was hard to call them close, but she still hoped that someday they would realize how wrong they were. They had her little daughter who didn't realize she had a different mom. She was too small, but it was immediately obvious that no one wanted her there at all. She was just shoved into the arms of a nanny, even though she could have been given to her own mother. The thought hurt her terribly, and it was almost impossible to deal with. Lily cried, driving down the highway until she stopped, realizing that tears were covering her eyes. When she pulled up to the house, she saw Audrey's car. Fred's sister was standing there, shuffling her feet, trying to call Lily's apartment on the intercom. "That's what I thought. You went to see him. Letting me take a big sweet cake with me is the perfect thing to have after a tantrum," Audrey said, nodding at Lily. Lily knew she looked like a crying child, but she couldn't help it. She wanted to talk to someone, even if it was the sister of the man who had betrayed her so cruelly. When Audrey entered the apartment, she acted as if it was her place, looking at everything, touching everything. Everything was interesting to her. Lily had no negative feelings towards Audrey. She was just a tactile person who liked to touch everything and wanted to touch everything. "And what did she say to you in there? I bet Fred didn't even come out." "Damn coward," Audrey said. "She said it was all my own fault and that I should be grateful in general. You see, I didn't appreciate what a wonderful husband and child I had. So she decided to take it all away along with the money. And she said it was her idea to set it up," Lily said, deciding to summarize the situation. "Well, that's what I thought. My brother's got a brain like a walnut, and he wouldn't have thought to set it up. He's as driven as a calf, especially when it's to his own advantage. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. Okay, I'll figure something out. Don't worry, sooner or later I'm gonna take it all away from them. I've got all the lawsuits ready to go to court. I've got lawyers ready. I'll prove that he got his inheritance dishonestly," Audrey said. "What makes you think that after all these trials you'll get the money and property?" asked Lily. She tried to keep the conversation going, to look engaged, but her thoughts were all about her daughter. She couldn't let go of the idea that her little girl was alive and in the hands of strangers. "I don't expect to get anything," Audrey confessed honestly. "The most important thing for me is to deprive him of everything, and I'll figure it out on my own. Don't worry, it's all settled. There's no point in worrying. How do I get my daughter back? I just started a new profession. I'm in debt. I don't have money for a lawyer. If they refuse to do DNA, if they have so much money, they'll figure out what I want very quickly and rob me of the opportunity to be together with my daughter again." Lily shared her fears. She realized that Audrey probably didn't care about what was going on. She only wanted her own revenge, and Lily's wishes didn't matter. But when Audrey spoke again, Lily was surprised. "You shouldn't worry about it either. Sooner or later they'll give you the girl back on their own, and I think it will happen very soon. A magpie on the tail brought that your girlfriend very quickly regretted that they kept the child. And besides, she's pregnant right now. So wait, they'll bring it to you in a basket and tell you that you have to raise the baby yourself," Audrey said. "And if that doesn't happen?" Lily asked automatically. "Then I'll help you. I remember how you helped me when I was in the hospital for months. I remember how you were always on my side time after time. So don't worry, I'll help you," Audrey said. They sat there for hours talking, discussing everything but the whole situation with Fred and May. But all both young women could do was think about it. No matter how they covered themselves, the situation was obvious. Lily was learning to live again. She couldn't spend a single day without thinking of her daughter, who was somewhere out there being raised alone. It was useless to hope that these people would have the conscience to return the child. But there was no money for lawyers either, nor was there any way to hand them out quickly every day. Lily reassured herself that she could do it. She just needed more time to do it now. It would work out. but it would take a good effort. She reassured herself that as soon as she had saved up enough money, she would go straight to court. Audrey had already declared full-scale war on Fred, and he was grabbing every opportunity to protect himself. Lily wasn't involved in any of this. None of it was necessary. She worked from home, had already exceeded her normal office salary, and continued to study, to develop, because that was how she could earn money for lawyers and give her daughter back. The thought that her baby girl was alive, that she, even if she never got her hands on her, was in the world, warmed Lily. But she didn't know that very soon there would be a series of events that would drastically change her life. And when she would later remember how she sat and cried, missing her daughter, she would marvel that everything had changed so quickly. The day was long and hard. It was cold outside. It rained all day and only stopped by evening. The wind was still strong and was still hitting the windows every now and then. Lily went to the window, watched as someone pulled up in the driveway, quickly hurried to the door. And then the rain came again, turning the asphalt into a torrent of water. The storm drains had either already filled up or no one had bothered to clean them out. Either way, tomorrow when she went to the store, she would have to hop between the puddles in the hope that her feet would stay dry. Lily stepped out onto the balcony, breathing in that cold, fresh air that made her feel like she was living. Needed to get on with her life, clinging to every opportunity to feel like she belonged. The fear that she would fly off the handle with grief was more compelling. When there was a knock on the door, Lily flinched. At first, she thought it was a branch tapping on the glass. She stuck her head into the kitchen, listening, and the knocking on the door repeated. She decided it was probably a neighbor coming in, probably needed help with something again. When Lily went to the door and looked through the peephole, she was nearly speechless. Fred was standing there, looking around fearfully, obviously afraid that he wouldn't be welcome here. When she opened the door, the first thing she saw on his face was surprise. The apartment looked different even at the entrance, and he was quite surprised by that. "I came to talk," Fred said, lowering his eyes. "Will you let me in?" "No, I won't," Lily said. "If you have something to say it that way or go away, where my beautiful best friend is waiting for you. There's no place for a traitor in this apartment, so you're not welcome here." He was silent. Apparently, Fred was trying to find the right words. There was that unpleasant, hunted look again. It was hard for him to accept that he was no longer welcome in this apartment. "I have my daughter in the car, and I only need to talk to you about my daughter," Fred said. "You left her alone in the car. Go get her. We'll talk later," Lily replied, shocked. She couldn't believe that her little baby girl was left in the car and alone. Someone could have scared her through the window, stolen her. Anything could have happened. She shook with fear for her daughter. Fred went downstairs. He opened the front door when her daughter's cries were heard, and Lily felt her insides tighten with pain. Her little girl must have been crying in the car until her father had the sense to take her away to keep her safe. "I didn't think she'd wake up," Fred said, literally handing his daughter from hand to his ex-wife. "Come in," Lily said, rocking her daughter. The girl, as if realizing that her mother was in front of her, nuzzled into Lily's chest and fell silent. The young woman felt her tears starting to flow. She couldn't hold herself back, couldn't keep all these conflicting emotions inside. Fred was surprised that months later the girl still remembered who her mother was. Fred himself couldn't find the words to start a conversation. It was hard to get used to the idea that he would be able to communicate with his wife, even though he had almost buried her alive by turning the car around under the impact. Now, as he thought back on it all, he felt sick to the stomach at the thought that he had almost become a murderer. He had listened to his mistress, who he had fallen head over heels in love with, and he couldn't get rid of the thought that if he had done the right thing then, he would have killed his wife, his daughter. Would he really be able to forgive himself after that? From the annoyed look on his face, Lily couldn't understand why Fred had come. "What do you want?" she asked, looking at him and not realizing what he needed right now. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask for your help." Fred was silent, and it was obvious how hard this conversation was for him. "May's pregnant, so I've decided we don't need 2 children. And May doesn't want to deal with your daughter either. So we made a mutual decision that we're gonna give her back to you. I will solve everything with the documents. She will be your daughter again. Everything will be restored. They will decide that there is a mistake in the documents. No one will not even prick their nose. Lily was in shock. Everything happened exactly as Audrey had suggested. They had played with the girl and now they wanted to give her to her mother. Lily clutched her daughter to her, realizing that they would never let her go again. All her pain, her doubts vanished in an instant. Her baby girl was in her arms, and she never dreamed of anything more. In a month, you'll have all the papers in your hands. Tomorrow, I'll send a driver to bring your things in the crib. Well, I don't want to spoil my new family, Fred said. If someone from the outside heard this conversation, knowing perfectly well about the family ties of these three people, he would have considered this dialogue monstrous. But Lally didn't care. Let her think what she wanted. If it made him feel better, that was only his problem. She herself had gotten what she had dreamed of. She had a daughter in her arms, and no one would ever take that daughter away from her again. Now that was the biggest reward of all. She's always crying, screaming. We are already very tired. We want to raise our own child, not hers, Fred said calmly, shrugging his shoulders. This is your daughter too, Lily said. I didn't participate in her childhood. You didn't train me, and so I didn't. Anyway, I don't feel anything for her. There are no family feelings, Fred said blankly. Fred looked down at his feet, shuffling his feet. He looked more like a misbehaving student being reprimanded in the principal's office. You're making me feel guilty again, but I'm used to it. What do you want in return? Lily asked. She knew Fred never did anything for nothing. If he brought her a daughter, he must want something in return. Fred bit his lip, already anticipating that she could easily refuse him, and then he'd be left empty-handed, back home to May with a baby in his arms, completely confused. I've committed a crime, and since you're alive, you can easily report me. I've got so much money now, I'm not afraid of justice. But on the other hand, Audrey's putting pressure on me. If things go south now, I'm looking at jail or worse. I'll give you my daughter, I'll give you her papers, I'll bring you her things, and in return you won't report me. Deal? Fred asked. She nodded. Even if he said she had to cut off her own arm to give her daughter back, she would agree. Lily was ready for any conditions, just to have her little girl by her side again. And so Fred, turning around rather abruptly, simply walked away, relieved of the responsibility, got what he wanted, and so it was safe to leave. He had a perfectly contented face, for he hadn't even expected to get everything so easily. Lily fell to her knees, cradling her daughter, sobbing to her heart's content, realizing that they were finally together again. The baby looked up at her mother, smiling, kissing her on the cheek, as if even she realized that Lily was her real mother. It was immediately apparent that no one had been practicing with the girl. She was noticeably behind in development, and now all of Lily's money was spent on bringing her daughter back to the same level as her peers. The girl was very quick to grasp everything on the fly. Fred really helped with the paperwork. Lily didn't bother to file a report on him. When Audrey came and asked to do it, she understood why Lily refused. Audrey did not condemn her. She simply accepted it as a fact, thanked for the previous help, promised that if necessary, she would help the little girl financially. But by this time, Lily was already well advanced in her work and in financial help. She did not need support at all. But time was running out. Audrey was right. Sooner or later, justice would be served. And when Audrey came to her with a bottle of wine, cakes, a big toy under her arm, Lily realized that everything had come to fruition in the best possible way. Who would have thought that a single young woman, embittered by the fact that she got nothing, could put a mischievous brother in his place who thought he'd escaped justice? But it caught up with him and made him realize that in this life, everything is far from so simple. Lily was glad to see Audrey. Since that conversation in the hospital, they began to communicate often, becoming quite firm friends. Audrey loved her niece very much and spent a lot of time with little Chloe. But now the little girl was in kindergarten. They could sit quietly, chat, spend time together. Audrey looked absolutely happy. Her smile literally stretched from ear to ear. Can you imagine? This idea thought he could throw money everywhere. But I'll tell you the best part. The idea didn't even find out how much money he had in his accounts. Guy, I can't believe it was so easy. It turns out that our old auntie wasn't so good at owning her own property, going into debt, selling everything to continue her old lifestyle. Turns out he has a house, some money, and huge debts, Audrey said, then laughed. How could he not know that? I thought he had read everything before he took such a risk, said Lily, who really found it hard to believe that her cunning ex-husband had missed such an important factor. That's the thing, he didn't know anything. The old woman didn't tell him anything because she didn't remember anything. At home, the ruler had no right to say anything, so he was left in the dark. And when he suddenly wanted to take matters into his own hands, it turned out to be to everyone's advantage. Everyone refused the inheritance because no one wanted to take on such a huge responsibility. Can you imagine the debts to maintain the estate? My God, I can't believe it. It was fate that punished him, Audrey said. And then she laughed. She laughed so loudly and contagiously that Lily gave in and started laughing too. It seemed to get rid of all the pain that had built up inside her, and they laughed and laughed and laughed. They laughed, and then Audrey spoke again. But that's not all, my dear. God, I can't believe I'm about to say this. Your crazy girlfriend who decided to sit on his neck, who came up with this whole idiotic plan in the first place, is now in the same kind of bondage. And even if she divorces him, which she was going to do, it turns out that half of the debts will go to her. I don't know how this whole thing got so twisted, but it's just really cool. They got it all worked out and now they're going to have to deal with it, Audrey said. Maybe it's really the boomerang rule, Lily asked, shrugging her shoulders. She didn't believe it, but that's what had happened. Everyone got what they deserved. Fred wanted to get a lot of money to get rid of his wife and child and ended up in debt, along with his girlfriend, who was also counting on a big profit, but was left with empty pockets. Audrey and Lily sat for a long time, laughing, discussing how the whole story ended. Audrey talked about herself, about plans for the future, and in general was now happy. She had finally gotten justice. Fred would finally realize that not everything in this life happens at his whim. And May, who was willing to put up with the death of her best friend and her child, just to get as much money as possible, would finally realize that everything was not just about them. A few days passed after that conversation. Lily was walking with her daughter from kindergarten. The little girl was laughing, trying to tell something emotionally. She was not able to pronounce all the words, but she tried hard. The classes were helping. She was already at a normal level, and it was only going to get better from here. She called Lily Mommy as she was supposed to, though Lily herself was worried that her daughter wouldn't be able to switch. But it turned out that Lily had too good an opinion of her daughter. After a while, little Chloe will not even remember that she was in an accident, that they tried to accustom her to another mother. It would all be forever in the past and wouldn't even be a part of her memories. Lily saw a familiar car. The girl, who also looked at the car, looked then immediately at her mother. She reacted to her mother's emotions, but had absolutely no reaction to the car. She did not recognize her father. To her, it was just some strange uncle. "Why did you come here?" Lily asked. "I need to talk just the two of us," said Fred. "Turn to the mirror and talk to the two of you. If you don't like it, wait. I'll take my daughter to gymnastics. I'll have a few minutes to spare," said Lily, who was sure he couldn't do anything to her now. Fred looked exhausted, gaunt, miserable. He clearly looked like a man who had lost everything. His eyes were filled with pain and disappointment. As Lily dropped off her daughter, she saw him following her. Fred, apparently, was not going to waste time, or maybe he was just afraid that she would not come back and he would just stand there again, waiting for her in the driveway. "Come on, talk, but make it quick. I've got enough to do without you," Lily said. "Lily, you and I, my daughter, we have a common past. Maybe we can get everything back. Remember how good we were. Do you really want to leave it all behind forever?" He said with hope in his voice, as if he was sure she would agree. But Lily laughed in his face. "You faked an accident. You literally shoved me under a car, hoping it would kill me. You put your own child under a car hoping you wouldn't have to pay child support. And after all that, you want to tell me that you love me and want to be with me?" Lily asked, and involuntarily laughed again, because she couldn't hold back the bubbling emotions. Fred was embarrassed. He began to realize that nothing would work. To the last, he hoped that he could get through to his ex-wife. But apparently, everything was not so simple. "Fred, what didn't work out with the new mistress?" suggested Lily with a chuckle. "She left me, found out that I have a lot of debts, divorcing me now, and also wants to hang all the debts on me, but I'm sure that she will not succeed. Look, if you and I got together, it would be easier. You know, he said. I'm not that silly girl who looked at you and hoped to be loved. I'm not a dog trying to earn love for myself, and you can't make me feel guilty. So you don't have to try, it'll be easier for you, not me. So you can let it go. I'm not going back to you, she said. The words made him sober up a little. He was sure he could push her, but it wasn't working. She was much stronger than she had been before. Her temper was different. She really wasn't the kind of girl who could be easily pushed around, made to feel guilty. Look, Fred, I know you have a completely idiotic view of life. You think that if I say no to you now, it's only temporary. Just get it through your head, and don't you ever come near me again. I will never be with you. We'll never have anything. I'll never let you talk to my daughter after you almost killed her. Don't you ever come here again. You're nothing here, you're dead to us, Lily said. She left him and walked into the building. Fred remained standing in the street, staring after her. His one chance to make his life better was gone.
Demi was born and lived in the countryside. She dreamed of going to the city from childhood. Go to study, you'll stay there later, her mother told her. I'm afraid not to get in, said the girl about her fears. Why are you talking about the city then? Sit here and stay here. Joan knew she had a daughter who was a troublemaker. Demi had finished 8 grades and was now sitting on her mother's neck. We'll go to the village council tomorrow and get you a job, the woman said sternly. Who? Demi realized that sooner or later her mother would get tired of it all. She could be anything, a milkmaid or something. Joan didn't care what she did, as long as Demi got a job. But Demi was never going to be a milkmaid. In the night there were loud screams. The girl opened her eyes and saw the light outside the window. It was Birdie's neighbor's house. She was scared. Mommy, the girl screamed. When she looked at what was happening outside, she realized that in a few more minutes the flames would spread to their barn. God, Joan began to fidget. She was gathering some things. Why are you sitting there? The mother was trying to stay calm. She grabbed a folder with documents, warm clothes, and dragged her daughter out of the house. The whole village was already outside. Someone was carrying water in buckets stand. People were doing everything they could to put out the flames. There are children in there, shouted a man who was a neighbor on the other side. Joan wet the blankets, threw them over herself, and rushed into the burning house. The rest of the group just groaned and stood with their hands over their mouths. A few moments later, the same woman appeared in the passage. The blanket on her back was burning. She had a baby in her arms. She was also pushing a second one in front of her. Is there anyone else in the house? She was asked. I don't know. She coughed violently. Finally, the sirens of the fire trucks were heard. Along with them were an ambulance and the police. The motorcade pulled up to the house. It was worked quickly. The fire had been extinguished. The houses looked, as the neighbors suggested. There were people left there. The grandmother who stayed with the children died. You knew them. A policeman approached Demi. Of course, they're our neighbors. She looked at the young man. He was handsome. Come on, let's talk. He took her aside. I need to take my mom home. The girl pointed to a woman who was standing not far away. Then I'll help you. My name is Mike. He followed her. Demi, she said as she walked. The girl took Joan under her arm. Mike came from the other side. She seemed to be in a stupor. Here we'll talk. The young man took out a paper and sat down at the table. Demi poured him tea and told him everything she knew about the dead woman. Yes, it's not easy for children now, he shook his head. To go through such a thing. Demi was sad. Everything calmed down. People dispersed, cars drove away. Only in the air there was still the smell of burning. Mom, you're okay. Her daughter came up to the woman. That's how it is. In the evening we were talking to Claire, and now she's gone. She lamented. Nothing can change. The girl stroked her head. Demi went into the kitchen. She sat at the table and looked out the window. For some reason, Mike came to mind. She remembered his dimples when he smiled. I wish I had a husband like that, she said under her breath. She got up and went to her room. There wasn't much time left until morning. She woke up, her head buzzing, looked at the clock. It had only been a couple hours since she'd laid down. Demi washed her face, ate breakfast, went out to the yard. The girl didn't know what she should do. She remembered yesterday's conversation with her mother that she would take her to get a milkmaid. The girl went out of the gate. She was in no mood. Suddenly, she saw a police car coming towards her. She looked closely. Mike was driving it. "Hello." Demi was happy. She thought she needed some more clarification. "And I'm right behind you," the young man said to her without greeting. "What?" was discouraged by the girl. "I don't know what happened. Yesterday when we talked to you all night did not come out of my head. I decided to take it as it comes. It's love at first sight. I didn't think there was such a thing. Told my boss I'd be a little late, and here I am. To pick you up in town." He spoke very fast and only glanced at her occasionally. "You won't believe it. I've been thinking about you too." She blushed. "You'll think about it or we'll go." He was determined. "I don't know." She looked back at the house where she'd grown up. "I'm ready to wait." He stood at attention. "I'll be right there." Demi went in the house, threw her stuff down, came back out. "I have to warn my mom." The girl ran down the street to where Joan worked. Demi found her mom quickly. "What happened?" The woman was frightened. The daughter stood there breathing heavily. "Mommy, I'm leaving," Demi said and waited for a reaction. "What? Where? With who?" she fussed. "Mike is here for me, remember? He was at our place yesterday," said the girl, and her eyes glistened. "You were in your mind you just met, and if it doesn't work out, Mother didn't understand this behavior. Nothing in the city hooked, there and stay, was Katharina Demi. All right, do as you please." Joan knew she couldn't change anything. She's a stubborn daughter. She'll do what she wants anyway. "You can always come home." "Thank you." She kissed her mom on the cheek and ran to Mike. "Come here." Joan shouted at her, but Demi couldn't hear her. She was running toward her new life. Mike was standing nearby, so tall and handsome. "You decided?" He saw her stumble and almost fall. "Yeah, we're good to go." Demi was already at the car. "So brave." Mike grinned and got behind the wheel. The girl drove, looked out the window and could not believe that everything could happen like this. Her dream had come true. She was going to the city, and what would happen next, she didn't care. "Well, to my place?" The young man turned to her. "Do you live alone?" she asked. "No, with my mother." He looked in front of him. "And how will she perceive that you only met me yesterday and already brought home?" Demi was very interested in that question. Hopefully well. He didn't know it himself. He only thought about it now when she brought it up. "Okay, I'm agreeable. We'll get along." Was in this to Katharina Demi. They got out of the car, climbed the stairs, entered the apartment. "Hello," Demi shouted ahead of her companion. "Why yell like that?" the woman grumbled. "Oh, I didn't mean to." The girl covered her mouth with her hand. Mom. Me, Demi. This is Demi. She's going to live with us," Mike said and looked at her. "You were crazy. How long have you two known each other?" the woman asked. "Mom, don't. I'm an adult. This is my private life." He took the girl by the hand and led her to his room. "Grown up," the mother said quietly and pressed her lips together. Margaret was a school teacher. She had grown up in an intelligent family. 20 years ago, her husband died. She'd never lived with anyone else and raised her son alone. She put everything she knew and knew how to do into Mike. She hoped he'd meet a nice girl. They'd get married and everything would be fine. And now he brings home this redneck. Well, what could she say? The woman knew the night cuckoo would cuckoo anyway, so she didn't say anything now. But Margaret hoped her antics would get Demi to leave the house herself. "I'm off to work, and you see yourselves all right here," Mike was saying to the mother and the girl. "Of course," Margaret smiled. "What are we having for dinner?" Demi asked her. "Not for lunch, but for breakfast," she corrected her. "Good for breakfast," the girl sighed unhappily. "Oatmeal." The woman went to the kitchen. "Phew, how can you eat this nasty stuff?" Demi grimaced. "There's nothing to yuck about. If you don't want it, stay hungry," Margaret muttered. The girl went to her room. She was bored, and she did not want to be with the lady of the house. She was exhausted. She waited for Mike from work, looked at the window, read a book, lay on the couch, even made a small rearrangement in the apartment. She rushed over to meet him when he arrived. "She's finally here. I have a couple of days off. We'll spend them together," he promised her. "Let's go out to eat. I haven't left here at all today." she told the young man. Sure, he opened the door. The mother was in the room. They went into the kitchen. Margaret came to them immediately. Can she do anything at all? She said to her son. Why do you ask me that? She's here too. Her son didn't turn to her. He was making a sandwich. And what kind of food is it to eat a full meal? She watched her son pour the tea. Mom, please, Mike begged her. Okay, she turned to Demi. What? She didn't understand. Tomorrow we need to do a general cleaning in the apartment. Go to the store. I'm counting on you. She raised her head proudly and went to her room. What a mother you have, Demi said quietly. You better get along with her, Mike advised. I'll try, she promised. Good. Mike believed her. The next day, as promised by the young man, they went for a walk. The guy and the girl were completely unfamiliar, so they needed to learn more about each other. You are so funny, Demi said and laughed. You are too. He tapped the tip of her nose with his finger. After walking around and taking a little tour, the couple went to a movie. Demi snuggled up to Mike. He was the only person in her life she could rely on right now. We're back. Margaret sighed in the hallway. Yeah, it's nice out. Her son smiled at her. Come in. Dinner's on the table, the woman said. Thank you, Demi said. She needed to build a relationship with her future mother-in-law, she thought. Oh, you sycophant, the woman spat. When Demi and Mike had eaten, the girl offered to do the dishes. She could do all the chores. The next day, while Mike was doing something in the bathroom, the girl began to curl the rugs, then took them out into the yard, shimmied them. Then she came home, scrubbed the floors everywhere, even asked Mike to move the cabinets away from the walls. Wow. Margaret came back from the store. You like it? Demi knew she'd done well. Good for you. The woman shook her head. I'll go to my neighbor's house, she asked me yesterday. Demi went to the kitchen. She had already put the meat cooking. Now all that was left was to dress the soup. The second course was ready. What smells so good in here? Mike came into the kitchen. Sit down or wait for Mom, she asked. Sure, we'll wait. He took a step toward Demi. They had never hugged or kissed before this moment. The door creaked open, and they separated without doing anything. Oh, I'm so hungry. Margaret went into the kitchen. And we have everything ready, said the young man cheerfully. I was of a different opinion of you. The woman looked into Demi's eyes. You see how everything turned out. Did not show her cool temper, girl. You bet, get a job or go to school. The hostess switched to another topic. We'll think about it. Mike stood up in defense of the girl. Okay, if necessary, I can help with the enrollment, Margaret offered. Mom can really teach you a lot, Mike said. They sat for a while. Demi washed the dishes, and then they went to their rooms. And what do you think about enrollment? The boy asked her. I don't even know, she was evasive. But a week later, she was sitting next to Margaret. She showed her and told her everything she needed for admission. It turned out that it was not so difficult, the girl dived in. At this point, she and Mike were already living as a family. Margaret also got used to Demi. She was glad that her son did not listen to her then, and his fiancée did not go back. I was a fool not to have done it right after high school. I love it all so much, Demi said. At home, she talked about what they were being taught every day. It was obvious that the girl was interested. You were smart. Mike stroked her hair. What are you embarrassing me? She blushed, because her mother saw it all. Isn't it time you two got married? Margaret asked from the room. Yes, Demi. Mike turned to her. I agree, she laughed. The young people had only been to the village where Demi lived twice before. Now they were going there to inform Joan that they were going to get married. Margaret had prepared for this event very carefully. She, together with Demi, went to the atelier. They ordered a dress. Mike was bought a suit. Of course, there was also a restaurant. The girl was so excited about it. She realized that if she had stayed in the village, none of this would have happened, which meant that Mike was sent to her by fate. Yes, sent Mike at the registry office. Yes, Demi echoed him. A kiss sealed their answers. My children, I congratulate you. Margaret cried right there. After that, there was a noisy celebration in a restaurant, and then life began, where anything could happen. Will you be happy with grandchildren? Margaret asked her daughter-in-law. God willing. Demi always answered the same thing. 2 years they had nothing worked out, and finally, the long-awaited pregnancy. Mike's back is acting up. In the evening, she asked her husband to give her a massage. "Roll over," he told her. Ouch! She lay on her stomach and threw up. "What are you doing?" It wasn't funny. "I don't know. I felt dizzy." Margaret came into their room when she heard screaming. "What's going on here?" She looked at her sister-in-law and started smiling. "What's so funny?" She looked at her mother-in-law. "Soon there will be a grandchild," said the woman pleadingly. "How did you realize it?" The son came up to his mother and looked at Demi attentively. "I have lived, I know," was Catherine and Margaret. And indeed, when the girl went to the hospital, she was told that she was expecting a child. What a blessing it was. Her husband was waiting for her in the street. They went through the streets. On the transport did not want to go. Now Demi's life was beginning to change. Pregnancy was hard. She was constantly nauseous, dizzy, fainting often. "That's because you're not eating anything," Margaret scolded her. "I can't." Demi sat on a stool. She couldn't even look at the food. She was so sick. "You have to get in the mood and force yourself," insisted her mother-in-law. "Okay," Demi agreed. But as soon as she ate, it all came out again in a moment. Oh, when it's due, the woman hugged her daughter-in-law. She felt sorry for her. "I wish it were sooner." Demi was looking forward to it too. In the 7th month, the doctors insisted that the girl went to the hospital. She didn't refuse. At home it was unbearable, and here the doctors still did something. Demi put IVs. After that she could at least eat a little. Finally the day came. In the morning, Demi went to the bathroom and realized that something was wrong with her. Of course, she didn't pay much attention to it, and when she told the doctor about it, she took Demi to the exam room. "All right, get ready. You're going to give birth today." The woman smiled. Demi started to get scared. She had read and heard a lot about childbirth, but now that it was starting to happen to her, she became anxious. "Don't worry so much. Everything will be fine," Mike told her. "Yes, I understand, but it's the body's way of reacting." Demi didn't understand anything yet, but not even an hour later, as began such pain that she forgot about all the worries. There was only one thing on her mind: when the pain would go away. Demi was screaming. She couldn't hear what the doctors were saying. It was making everything go bad. "Calm down," the woman in the white coat shook her. "I can't," but at least Demi heard her. It got easier after that. She started to listen. Finally, it was all over. Both the doctor and the laboring woman were exhausted. "The boy," the doctor said. Demi wanted to see him, but she couldn't even lift her head. "It's okay, they'll bring him soon," the nurse reassured her. She should have told Mike, but how could she do that if she had no strength at all? And her husband didn't wait at home for a call, in case the phone didn't work, or they wouldn't let him call. As soon as Demi disappeared at the window, he went and sat on the bench, waiting. "Young man," called him a young girl in a robe. "Are you for me?" He stood up. "You're Mike, Demi's husband." She was coming toward him. "Yes," he nodded. His heart was pounding frantically in his chest. "Congratulations, you're having a boy." She smiled and shook his hand. "How's the wife?" This question also interested him. "Everything is fine. Both are healthy. Now just wait for discharge," she said. The girl left and Mike went to the window of his wife's room. "Demi," he shouted. She heard him, but it was so hard to get up. "Why are you lying here? You have a baby now. No lying down." The nurse came with the baby in her arms. "Yeah, I'll be right up." Demi got up, took her son in her arms and went to the window. "Thank you," Mike shouted. He was grinning from ear to ear. "Look, there's your daddy," the young mom said quietly to the baby. The girl lay with her son and could not admire him. It was time for discharge. Mike, Margaret, and friends were already waiting at the entrance. Dad was handed a package with a blue bow. He, in turn, presented a small bouquet to Demi. "Oh, what a tiny," Grandma said. They arrived home and the crib was already in the parents' room. Margaret did not leave her daughter-in-law and her grandson. "And now let's go swimming." She took the baby in her arms. Demi watched everything. If she had once thought that she did not want to live with her mother-in-law, she was now grateful for her help. "You do everything so well. I still have to learn and learn from you," the girl told her. "Nothing, you'll learn." She was hooting in the bathroom with Tom. The family was getting noisy now. Tom would cry in the evenings. Grandma would put him on her knee and stroke his back. The boy quickly calmed down. Then he crawled, moving around the room so fast that no one could keep up with him. "Mike, Tom took his first step today," Demi told her husband when he got home. "Wow, I missed it all again." He was upset, but when his son said his first word, he was in his daddy's arms. Say it again," he pleaded with him. It was so funny to watch the little boy grow up. The grandmother from the village also came when the grandson was a year old. Joan brought all her homemade milk, cottage cheese, sour cream, and vegetables. "Why didn't you warn her? You would have met her," Demi asked her. "It's all right," she carried it. She couldn't wait to hold the boy in her arms. "That's good," Margaret said when she saw that everyone was ready. "The guests are coming tomorrow, and we need to prepare the table," Demi said. "We've already put everything on the cold," the grandmothers fussed. 1 year of Tom's life was celebrated in a big way. The guests gave so many different toys that there was nowhere to put them. "Come to the village. The boy needs fresh air," Joan said as she left. "Okay," hugged her daughter and son-in-law. Tom went to kindergarten. Demi got ready to go to work. She was offered a cashier position at an institution. Grandma was a big help. She took her grandson to daycare, walked him in the yard. "If it weren't for you, I would have had to go broke," Demi talked to her mother-in-law in the evening. "It's okay." Margaret had already bonded so much with Demi as if she were her daughter. They liked to sit up in the evenings and talk about all sorts of things until Tom fell asleep. The boy was growing up very fast. Now that Demi was working, she didn't have time to notice how the days went by. Here is the son already at the graduation in kindergarten, telling poems. "Perhaps we should send him to the country for a summer month," Margaret said. "I wouldn't mind going there myself." "Well, what's the trouble? Pack up and go." Mike looked at them, and Margaret, who was completely city dweller, went on vacation with her grandson. The in-law was very happy to have guests. She was tired of living alone. From then on, every summer Tom traveled with his grandmother to breathe fresh air. When the boy studied in the 5th grade, he began to express his opinion. "I do not want to go to the village. I want to stay here. You were stubborn." "How can it be? We used to vacation there every year." Margaret stood next to him. "You go and have a rest." Tom looked at her. "I will. I'll see what you'll do here alone." Margaret began to pack. She was planning to move to that village in general. It was quiet and beautiful there. The woman had even talked to her son about it. He said he would think about it. "Why aren't you packed?" Demi came for lunch. "I'm not going anywhere." And to her he showed his character. "No, my dear, this year you'll still go, and then we'll see who will stay home with you." "Come on, get ready," she told him. He mumbled something to himself, but packed his bag. He and his grandmother sat again on the bus that was taking them to village life. The next year he didn't go anywhere. He said his mom had promised him that. "What are you going to do here?" Mike asked him. "Nothing, I'll watch TV at home." Tom didn't know what to say. He stayed at home for almost a month. "Tom, do you want to go to camp?" Demi asked him and showed him the voucher. "What can you do? The guy's never gone there yet." The whole family was packing Max for the road. Even Margaret had come from the village. She'd been living there for a few months. She loved it. "Be good there," Demi tried to admonish her son. I know, he didn't want to be told off like a little boy. The son left the house. He probably hadn't gotten there yet, and his mother and grandmother were already starting to think different things. But it had all turned out all right. Now Tom was asking them to buy him more and more trips. Where only he did not go, where he did not visit, everything was always interesting. Parents encouraged the boy in everything. He was good. When the 9th grade came to an end, Tom, as usual, was sent to camp. Margaret had already completely settled in the village. Micah and Demi were left alone in the apartment. The woman sat in the kitchen. Dinner was long ready, but her husband was still not there. Demi was very worried. She had already called to their department, but she was told that Mike had left long ago. She went from corner to corner. She couldn't even figure out where he was or what he was doing. At 11 p.m., the lock opened and Mike walked into the apartment. "Where have you been?" She came out of the kitchen, not yelling, speaking calmly. "Demi, don't be mad. I'm leaving," he said and walked into the room. Then he took out his bag and started packing. Mike explained, "My wife stood in the hallway and couldn't move. I met someone else, and I'm fine with her. I don't want to deceive you anymore. I'll talk to my son myself. Goodbye." He was standing in front of Dr. Catherine. What about us, the family? It's your apartment. She tried to stop him somehow. Go ahead, I'm not chasing you. He didn't even turn to her, just closed the door behind him. The woman stood in the hallway. She looked at that door and did not understand what she should do. After that, tears flowed from her eyes. She could not calm down. What to do? Where to run to? Who to ask? How could he do this? There were a million questions in her head, but no one could give her any answers. Demi, what's wrong? She arrived at work the next day and was met by a friend. Mike left me, she admitted honestly. How could he do that? You had such a good family, was amazed by her friend. I don't understand, everything was fine. He went to work in the morning, and when he came home, Demi was crying. She wanted to call Margaret for help, but there was only one phone in the village. Demi didn't want to call there. Everyone would know right away. She began to think who the other one Mike had left might be, but nothing came to mind. He'd never been known to cheat. Mom, I'm home. Tom arrived. A crying woman came out to him. What's wrong? He went straight to her. Dad left. She didn't lie. He left us. How could he? The boy couldn't understand. I don't know. She started crying again. The tears hadn't dried up this whole time. Demi threw all her energies into getting her husband back. She called mutual acquaintances to influence his decision. When she found out where he lived, she came, cried, begged, but Mike just looked at her and said nothing. I love you. Demi shouted to him, but there was nothing in her husband's eyes. Soon Margaret came to visit them. When she found out what her son had done, she immediately sided with Demi. Scoundrel, rumbled mother-in-law. What am I going to do now? It was getting close to New Year's Eve. Everything was falling apart. Tom had a hard time in high school. He came to his mother many times to talk to her, but she didn't care. She was crying about her husband leaving. Tom, are you with us? A friend he met at camp asked him. Yeah, my mother doesn't care where I am or what I'm doing, he said. And right after school, they would go behind the garages. There was a company gathering there. Obviously, they didn't do anything good there. He'd come home, he'd leave, but nobody noticed. Tom went from being a good boy to a bully. Demi, I found out he's going to be at the restaurant with her tonight, Margaret told her. Good, Demi was getting ready. The woman was ready to do anything to get her beloved Mike back. I'm with you, her mother-in-law told her. Good, the woman agreed. They showed up at the establishment fully armed. Demi was in a beautiful dress with excellent makeup and hair. What are you doing here? Mike jumped up from the table. I wanted to look at my potential daughter-in-law, Margaret said calmly. And you? Looked at Demi. And why can't I come to the restaurant? Is it illegal? She looked him straight in the eyes. Well, hello, child. Sat down at the table to the girl Margaret. Shall we talk? Demi asked. Okay. He once again looked back at the table where his mother was sitting. Hello. The young lady barely whispered. You do realize that your chosen one has a family, a wife and a child. And until you appeared in his life, everything was fine, said the woman in a calm voice. Why are you meddling in his life? She suddenly showed her teeth. Oh, we can be sassy. Margaret was not the type to take offense. What do you want? We love each other, she said. Margaret didn't even bother to ask her name. Okay, but know this, if Demi steps aside, I'll stay with you, and you'll really regret doing that. The woman leaned toward her. Are you threatening me? The woman stood up. Margaret smiled and went to the table where her son and his wife were sitting. Mom, why the circus? Mike looked at the woman. Demi, let's go, pretended not to notice his mother. Mike, I hope you understood everything. Tears stood in his eyes. Not even a month later, Mike returned. His new date still couldn't forget the conversation with the woman. She had broken up with him herself. Come on in. Demi opened the door. So what? How am I supposed to live with you after this? He kept his head down. Consider it nothing. We'll forget about it and never remember. Demi put her arms around her husband. What's that smell on you? Demi walked over to Tom. He was sitting in his room, looking at the TV, but as if he hadn't seen anything. I finally remembered that you have a son, he told her. While Demi was getting her husband back, Tom had gotten completely out of hand. Tom, I'm going to call my father. The woman was indignant. What will he do to me? I'll never forgive him for leaving. The guy was acting out of control. "Mike, it's all my fault," cried Demi in the kitchen. "What are you talking about? Tomorrow we will have a conversation with our son." Mike boasted. He tried to be right, but nothing helped. No matter how many times the parents talked to the son, he stood his ground. The kid would leave in the evening and come home practically in the morning. "Tom, what's going on with you? You used to be a normal boy, and now..." The mother threw a tantrum. "What do you want from me? You haven't noticed what I do for a whole year," snapped at the boy. "What are you going to do?" Demi yelled. "I'm not going anywhere." He waved her away. "What do you mean you won't?" His mother's eyes went wide. "It's very simple." He wasn't shy anymore, and he was coming straight home inadequate. "No, I won't let you do it. You're ruining yourself, your life." The woman didn't know what to say. "Okay," the guy waved her off. There were still a few months left till graduation. The boy managed to finish school. Teachers knew he was capable, so they pulled him through. So Demi, the homeroom teacher, came to the house. "I don't even know what he's gonna be." "Do not worry, we will do everything for it," soothed her mother. "I'm not Catherine." The woman shook her head. Tom didn't go to the graduation. He said he wasn't interested. No matter how much his father and mother persuaded him, he ignored their words. The guy still went to study, but not where he was going even recently. "You understand, it's your life, and you take it and break it with your own hands," his father told him strictly. "You tried to break everything with your own hands too," his son kept looking at him. "That's different," Mike sighed. Well, everything was going the way it was going. Now the young man was in technical school. "Are you not going home?" asked his roommate. "What am I going to do there at my parents'?" Tom told him. "I see. Come with me," Brad called out to him. "No, I'd rather be alone." He thanked him for the invitation. "Okay, I'll see you Monday." They shook hands. Tom stayed in the dormitory, but he couldn't stay in one place for long. In the morning, the next day, he got ready and went outside. The guy just wanted to go for a walk. He sat in the park on a bench, listening to music. Tom saw that people were passing by. Everyone was talking about something, doing something. It was interesting to watch. "Ouch!" The guy didn't hear the shout, but he felt that someone pounced on him. "What are you doing?" He turned around. "I'm sorry." A pretty girl was looking at him. How did this happen? Tom didn't understand. She came at him from behind the bushes. "I was jostling with my girlfriends." She got up, looked at the guy again, and disappeared behind the bushes. Tom heard them whispering and laughing. "Hi," he came out through the bushes to them. "You don't take offense, it really came out by accident," the girl said, and Tom looked at the one that had fallen on him. "Tom," he said to all of them, but his eyes were fixed on only one. "Susie, and her full name is Suzanne," she said. "Nice to meet you." He felt like doing something. He stood there silent. The girls looked at him. "Come with us," one of them said. "Where to?" He was still looking at that girl. "Just for a walk," they laughed. Good. He didn't care where he went, because the guy was walking. The company set off along the alley. "Let's go alone," he whispered to Susie. "What about them?" She pointed to the girls. "Well, the two of them, they won't be bored," he parried. "Good," she agreed with him. Susie turned to her girlfriends, said something to them, and was ready to go. "Come on." Tom pulled her in the opposite direction. It was good for the two of them, even though the boy and girl didn't know each other yet. "You're so fun and interesting. You're comfortable to be around," Tom told her. "With you too." She didn't look at him. "Come by the dorm tomorrow," Tom told her. "Okay," she agreed. They parted late that evening, just before Tom's dorm closed, but he made it. After he came in and went to bed, he thought about his new acquaintance for a long time. Tomorrow she came. Tom was already waiting for her. The guy and the girl walked. They talked about everything in the world. It was immediately obvious that they had common interests. "What do you do?" Tom asked her. "I study in pedagogical school, but I want to become a model." "I'm trying to do my best, but it's a start," said Susie. "I see you're going to the studio," he guessed. "Yes." She looked at him and wondered how he had guessed. "Will you show me the pictures?" he asked. "Yes, sometime." Then she laughed. The young people started dating. Tom didn't want to, but he had to go home. To be friends with a girl, you need money, and he didn't have any. "Son, why did you come for so long?" Demi hugged him. "It's all right." Tom went into the room. His father was sitting in the chair. "Hello." Mike looked at his son. "Hi," the boy mumbled. He still couldn't forgive the man. Demi started cooking something in the kitchen. She was really glad that Tom had come. She thought that his resentment towards his parents would last for a long time. "Son, come into the kitchen. Let's sit and talk," she called him. The boy came in. The mood was not at all. He sat and ate, and the woman kept asking him what was going on. "Mom, I'm fine." He didn't look at her. The young man just wanted to take the money and leave again in the morning to go to school. If he came, he must have needed something, the woman guessed. "Yes," he nodded. "I'd like some money. I don't have enough." He was ashamed to ask, but he had no choice. Of course, his mom tried to please the boy with everything. She went to the room. Tom heard her and his father whispering, but he didn't react in any way. Afterward, the woman came back in and put some bills on the table. "Thank you." Tom, though ashamed to ask, was pleased that his mother had given much more than he had expected. "When are you going back?" She didn't know how to find the words and what to say. "In the morning, and now to bed." He went to the room that had once been his. He hadn't stayed long enough. Demi stayed in the kitchen. Mike didn't come out until after Tom left. "Why don't you talk to him?" his wife asked him. "I can't. I'm ashamed," the man honestly admitted. "I understand." Demi sat next to him. Tom, while he was in his town, went to the store and bought a small bracelet. He wanted to please Susie, hoping she would like his gift. They met at the train station. "I have a surprise for you." The guy pulled a long box out of his pocket. "Why you didn't have to." She put her hands to her cheeks. "Look at it." He opened it. Inside was a thin chain as dainty as the girl herself. It was so pretty. Susie hugged the young man. Once again they walked and talked and did whatever they wanted. "What are they like, your parents?" Susie asked him. "Ordinary." He shrugged his shoulders. "I'd like to meet them," she said dreamily. "I don't know." Tom looked at her and thought that he could do anything for this girl. He decided that now it was too early to introduce her to her parents. But some time would pass, and they would definitely go. Except that first the guy decided to take Radu to her grandmother, and then already to her mother and father. He thought about it. She looked at him. "About us?" He smiled. Tom realized, even to himself, that he had changed a lot. Whereas before, perhaps to the anger of his parents, he had behaved very badly. Now he didn't need any of that. "Why don't you ever tell me anything about yourself?" the young man asked his girlfriend. "I think that you would not be interested in it," she honestly admitted. "I am interested in everything about you." He admired her. "Well, when the time comes, I'll be sure to tell you. It's just very hard for me to remember." She got sad all at once. "I won't insist. As soon as you decide, you'll tell me." He didn't know what attracted him to this girl, but he was drawn to her. Her black eyes were so deep. Tom loved to look at them. Susanna was an unusual girl. She liked to wear brightly colored short skirts, and she wore brightly colored makeup as well. Her exterior and interior did not match at all. When you first meet her, you think she was going out to party. But after she started talking, it was clear that her appearance was probably to attract attention. "Susie, aren't you tired of hanging around the dorms?" he asked her. "What do you suggest?" She glanced at him and laughed. "Let's get an apartment and start living together." He was shaking with excitement at his idea. "Oh no, I don't have the money for that." She didn't agree with him. "I'll arrange everything," was Catherine and himself young man. "It's such an expense." She hesitated. "But we'll always be there for each other." Tom was so enthusiastic that he was ready to run right now and look for a place to live. "Yes, that would be good." She touched his cheek with the palm of her hand. Somehow she always did that. Tom liked that gesture. The boy decided to patch things up with his parents. The next weekend he went home again. "You've been coming home a lot." His father opened the door. "Come on," did not come, took offense. Now he started and again not the same. Tom stood in the hallway. "What are you talking about?" Demi came out to them. "Come on in." They were sitting in the kitchen, just as their son used to eat, and his mother looked at him and smiled. "I didn't come here for nothing," Mike began. "I wanted to talk to you about rented accommodation," Tom began cautiously. "What's wrong with the dormitory?" Mike choked up. "No, I'm fine. I just wanted to ask if it's so noisy that I can't study or concentrate," he lied. "Mike, Maybe we should really rent an apartment. It's not that expensive. Demi took her husband's hand. I don't even know. The man drove his fork on his plate. The next day, Mike walked into his son's room. Okay, I agree to rent you an apartment, but for now only until the end of this school year. We must first look at your behavior, and then we will think further, he said. Thanks, Dad. Tom had even forgotten all his resentments. Mike had plans. He wanted to leave the organs and invent something new. Demi supported him because he knew they would succeed. Tom returned to Rada's house in a good mood. He spent a few days looking for an apartment, looking at prices. Finally, the apartment was found, the money was paid, and he could move in. It's so strange, Susie said as they moved things in. What was unusual about it? The boy didn't understand. He felt like he was at home. Tom, when I tell you my story, you might not want to see me again. She put her hand on his cheek again. What is this saying? I love you and I want to be with you forever. The boy was scared. He thought that in this way the girl was warning him about the imminent party. Not now, she said calmly. The boy and the girl started living together. They would both leave in the morning to go to school. After returning, Susie would cook and clean the house. In the evening, she had to run to the studio, and Tom stayed behind, sometimes cooking dinner. Everything was perfect in the couple. They never quarreled. There was no occasion. Susie did everything for Tom, and he tried to do everything for her. Beloved, I think it's time to tell you everything. She once sat down next to him on the sofa. What? Tom tensed. He dreaded moments like this. Remember, I told you that I would tell you my story at some point. She looked at him with her black eyes. Yes, he nodded and didn't know what he was about to hear. Or maybe he shouldn't. Sooner or later it will come out, then maybe it will be too late. Susie spoke judiciously. All right, the young man bowed his head. My mother's name is Neely. She raised her eyes to his. Why didn't you tell me before that you had a mother, and with such a beautiful name? Said Tom excitedly, but then he was silent, thinking that something might have happened to her. So when she was a young girl, she got involved with a guy. At first they were fine, but after that, she stopped talking. Tell me, Tom was ready for anything. My mother is a gypsy. Her relatives do bad things. That's where she brought her boyfriend. She sat staring at the floor. I know what you mean, Tom told her carefully. Lex hadn't done anything at the time, but he'd gotten hooked on illegal drugs when he'd gotten involved with his mother's relatives. The gypsies did it on purpose so he'd start distributing. She cried. Calm down, the young man hugged her. And then he died because his body couldn't cope, she mumbled. And mother decided to find out everything to the end, Tom. I don't know exactly for what, but she went to jail. She was pregnant with me then. Susie looked up at him. My poor baby, he kissed her. I was born there, in a place not so far away, and immediately I was taken to an orphanage. My mother didn't want to stay there with me, Susie said. So you grew up in an orphanage, the boy said. Yes, when she got freed, she came to get me, but I didn't want to go anywhere with her. I was scared. Susie was still sobbing. Did she manage to get you? Tom asked. Yes, she had all the conditions for that. And then it started. She brought men. It's horrible to remember. Neely got her maternity rights taken away, and I ended up back there. My family wanted to help, but no one would give me back to them. Susie was sitting up now. She wouldn't look at Tom. She was ashamed. My baby, he held her close to him. You're not reacting. Why? She looked at her young man. And how should I react? I do not want to regret. It's been over for a long time. Look at you. You're smart and beautiful, doing things, studying. He kissed her face. You don't think I'm gonna leave you because of them ever. You were the best. Finally, she smiled and hugged him. Time passed. Susie never asked Tom about his parents. She thought he kept quiet. So it must be so. You don't talk to them, do you? One day she just asked him. Who? He didn't understand. His parents. She faded her gaze. Why do you ask? He'd been thinking about it for a long time, thinking it was time to introduce his mother and father to his fiancée, but he didn't really want to do it yet. Things were going so well between them, and he was just afraid of scaring off that fragile relationship. No, you just never talk about them. She got up and went to make dinner. If you want, we can go and meet them, he ventured. Let's finish our studies first, and then we'll see. Susie had always been sensible. She went to the studio every night, where they practiced, took pictures. The girl brought home beautiful pictures. "You are already beautiful," the guy told her, "and on the photo you get even better." "Thank you." She did not get tired of thanking him for compliments. Parents rented Tom an apartment. If he had managed to find some income, he would not have asked them for money. But there were no suitable jobs. "Let's go to live after school in the town where I was born," Tom asked Greta. "Why don't you like it here?" Susie shrugged her shoulders. "No, I like it. It's just that I have some connections there." He smiled at her. "I've got a job coming up. The studio director has selected some girls for a contest, and I'm one of them." She was shy again. "Why do you always talk modestly about your achievements?" The young man could not understand. "I don't know." She shrugged her shoulders. While Susie was busy with her contest, the guy decided to go and visit his parents. They hadn't seen each other in a long time. Tom told Greta everything and went to the train station. There he took an electric train and came to his hometown. "Hi." Tom entered the apartment. The resentment against his father was somewhere deep inside, and if before he showed it, now he wanted to hide it somewhere deeper. "The family's here," his mother came out to greet him. "And this is what you have here." The boy saw boxes and other trash. "You live far away, and you don't know anything," the woman laughed. Tom saw that his mother had changed a lot. No, not externally, internally. Mike, after much persuasion from his wife, left the organs. They went into business together. First, they took out a loan to buy and rent the place. Then they started doing what Demi had in mind. Mike traveled, bought good Turkish things, and then they sold them in the store. Demi worked as a saleswoman herself. People came. They realized that the quality of things was very good, so they did not spare money. Mike and Demi were one of the first in town to do it. They paid off the loan, and the profits just kept growing. "What am I supposed to know?" Tom was puzzled. "We're selling our apartment because we bought another, bigger one," said his mother. She behaved freely and uninhibitedly. It was obvious that she felt herself the mistress of life. "I see." Though the boy didn't understand anything. "You'll help me." The father was walking by with boxes. "Sure." Picked up the son, and they carried them to the street. "What, you live in an apartment with a girl?" Mike asked him. "Yeah, thanks." The boy didn't know what else to say. "It's okay." In the parents' relationship, it was as if nothing had ever happened, and only Tom remembered it. After the boxes were in the car, they had to be taken to a new place. "Can I come with you?" The boy was interested to see the new chambers of his parents. "Of course, why would you ask?" The father smiled. They sat down and drove off. The mother saw it all from the window. She was glad that her son and his father were getting along better. After money appeared in the family, Demi really felt that she could do a lot. The woman began to dress in stores instead of at the market. They bought a car, a new apartment. The woman, if at first she still kept up the work pace, afterwards she said she was very tired, and they hired a salesperson. Now Demi was running the household at home. "But what? Everything is taken?" She asked her husband when they arrived. "No, we need to make one more run." He turned to Tom. "Let him stay here." "I need to talk to him," the mother asked. "I don't mind," the man said. He took a few more boxes and went to the car. "Wow, how things have changed for you." The guy quickly went to the kitchen and looked for something to eat. "Everything happens in life." Nemi sat across from him. "Why don't you tell us anything about the girls?" She started a conversation, which the guy was a little afraid of. He wouldn't look her in the eye. "Do you have any?" She waited impatiently. "Yes." He didn't want to tell her. "I don't want to pull words out of you," she begged him. "No, I'm not going to say anything yet." He shook his head. "All right, I'll wait." She opened the refrigerator, put bread, butter, and some jars on the table. "What's this?" He didn't understand. "Eat it. It's very tasty caviar." She spread butter on a slice of bread and picked up some caviar. "Phew, I don't want it." Tom pushed the whole thing away from him. "Oh, the Fed, look at him." The woman acted as if she had come down from heaven to some beggar's house. Tom was so disgusted by it all. He realized that his mother had changed so much in a short time that it seemed as if she wasn't her. But Tom needed money, so he couldn't just leave, and he had to put up with it. "Will your father be back soon?" He asked her. "I don't know, but you wanted him to." And now his mother didn't like him. It was like he'd come to a strange aunt's house to ask for money. I'm your son after all, and I'm studying in another city. So far I have to provide, he said quietly. Here, she brought him some bills and put them on the table. Thank you. Tom was shocked that his mother had money now. Okay, I'll be on my way then. He watched. Usually at this point she would run up and hug him. That didn't happen now. The mother just stood there and watched. Come on. Bye. Suzanne was home. She was cooking dinner and waiting for her lover to come home. Hi. He came into the apartment with a bag containing groceries. I'm here. She looked but didn't come over. How are things going with the pageant? He took off his shoes and walked to the kitchen. It's fine. The girl seemed to be understating things. Are you coming or not? Tom tried to get her to say, I am. She didn't make eye contact again. Why aren't you having so much fun talking about it then? Tom couldn't understand anything. She had always been so open and smiling, and now it was the opposite. Susie was more reticent. I don't want to bring it up yet, she said honestly. Okay, but don't forget to talk to me later. For some reason, he felt a pain in his heart. It seemed to Tom that the girl had grown cold to him. I love you. She leaned over and kissed him. I love you too. Tom smiled. After dinner, they decided to go for a walk, talked about everything but the girls' contest. When they got home, they went to bed. Tom thought that something had to be done about the relationship. He wanted this girl to be there for him forever. He didn't know what he needed to do to him to get him to give her up. Have you thought about talking yet? He asked her this morning. I don't think you'd like it. She became sad again. Talk, Tom insisted. I've reached the semifinals. The finals are coming up soon. I'll have to go abroad for a year. She stared out the window while she said all this. That's great news. Why are you so sad about it? He jumped up from his chair. I'll have to go alone. She cried. Why are you crying? A year isn't that long. I'll wait, and you'll do all your business there. He was at Catherine's. I don't want to leave you. She finally turned around. I don't want to break up with you either. But who said anything about breaking up? He didn't understand. After the contest, you'll have to sign a contract for at least a year, and that means two. She sat down on the table and picked up her fork. Susie, why don't we get married? He asked her. What? She turned to him. Why, while we're waiting for your final, by then we'll have just enough time to do the wedding and everything else. He put his arm around her. Are you serious? I do. She didn't know whether to be happy or cry. Yes, I'm absolutely serious. I'll buy you a ring tomorrow, he promised her. The guy realized that he had no money. He had to go to his parents again, but it didn't matter. He thought that for the first time they could live with him, because now the apartment was very big. And after Susie left, he would wait for her and just get a job, and maybe his father would help with that. Love, trust me, we'll be fine, he told her. I know, she kissed him on the nose. Tom decided to wait a little longer until his parents were settled in their new place, and then visit them. I'll try to get a job, he told her after they talked about the wedding. A month passed, but there was no ring, no business cards to his parents. Tom didn't know what he was afraid of. Then the boy pulled himself together. He decided to visit his grandmother and ask her advice. Susie, do you want to go with me to my grandmother's village? Tom asked her. Why not? She had wanted to meet his relatives for a long time. Then it's settled. Let's go, he smiled. Margaret and Joan had been best friends for a long time. Even though they lived in different houses, they spent all their time together. Oh, Joan, I'm so glad I decided to come here. It's quiet and peaceful, the woman said. Yes, I like it here too, I always have, said a local woman. What a lot of things they did. Margaret, as soon as she arrived, began to set her own rules in the village. She got a room in the clubhouse, and now many people came there. They did needlework and baking and skiing and ice skating and all sorts of things. And you're fun to be with, Joan told her. Yes, I could never sit still. Margaret was never bored. They were sitting on a bench when they saw two people coming toward them. Tom. Margaret jumped to her feet. It can't be. Joan stared into the distance, but couldn't see anything. I'm telling you, he's coming, the woman nodded. Who is he with? The second grandmother wondered. I don't know. With the girl, Margaret pursed her lips. God, why didn't he say anything? Joan said worriedly. They waited, both of them nervous. When Tom and Susie came closer, the grandmothers immediately rushed toward them. "Hello, family." They hugged their grandson and looked at the girl. "Grandmothers, you are always together," laughed Tom. "And you don't like something." The women smiled. "Meet Susie," he told them. "I'm Margaret." One introduced herself habitually. "And I'm just Grandma Joe," said the other. "Nice to meet you." The girl hugged both women. They went into the house, where various treats were waiting for them. "Have you been to your parents' house?" They sat down at the table and began to discuss. "No, I came to your place first," the boy admitted. "I don't know how Demi will receive you." The woman looked at Susie's outfit. It looked like she had just come from a strip club. "I've noticed she's changed a lot." Tom confirmed her words. "No, follow her lead. Don't listen to her," Margaret advised. "What can she start?" Joan sat there and didn't realize her daughter had changed so much. She could do anything. Tom didn't know why Grandma Margaret was talking about Mom like that, since they'd always gotten along so well. "So should we go to her or not?" The young man counseled his grandmother. "You young people do whatever you want. You have your whole life ahead of you." Joan looked at them. "I can't do that." Tom couldn't say out loud that he depended on his parents. "Ed, been there, done that. What are we going to spend our whole lives hiding now?" Tom stood up. At this moment, Susie was not in the house. She was taken away by her grandmother to show everything here. Of course, Margaret came up to him. She loved her grandson more than life and wished him nothing but the best. "You're on my side, maybe with us." He beckoned to her to come along. "God forbid." She crossed herself. "I see that you have already communicated, and it did not lead to anything good," concluded the guy. "If you've noticed that she's changed, I've already changed," the woman said in a whisper. "Okay." The young man saw that the grandmother and Susie were walking back. "And you, Catherine, that this is yours?" Margaret nodded at the girl. "You have something against it?" The boy turned to her. "No, you what?" She made big eyes to avoid arguing with him. "Are you leaving already?" Joan asked. "No, we'll stay till morning," said the grandson. He walked over to Suzanne. The rest of the day was spent together, talking, cooking. Afterward, they discussed various news. At dinner, the grandmothers were Katharina, that their grandson had made the right choice. They liked Susie. "Tom, let's go," his grandmother called him. "What's the matter?" He was surprised that everything was so secret. "You need to get Demi to listen to Susie," she advised him. "What's wrong?" The boy still couldn't understand. "If she sees her, she will definitely not accept her," was Catherine's grandmother. "Okay, tomorrow we'll figure it out." He looked somewhere past the woman and thought. When everyone went to bed, Tom couldn't sleep for a long time. He lay looking at the ceiling and thought again, why did everything happen in his life? Because he was born in a normal family. His mother was from the village. What right she had to command him now? After that, there were more thoughts, but the guy did not remember them. He fell asleep. "Wake up!" Ransom heard the voice of his grandmother in the morning. They got up, washed up, had breakfast, and went to the city to his parents. "I'm worried," Susie told him. "Me too," he told her the truth. The car stopped in front of the new house. The boy and the girl got out of the cabin. Tom himself had only been here once, when he helped his father bring things in. They went into the entryway. The apartment was on the second floor. "Mom, hi." Tom saw her and took a step to enter. "And who is this?" the woman asked without greeting. "This is Suzanne, my fiancée," said the son. "Did you pick her up on a street corner or in a strip club?" The mother was shocked to the core. "Listen," Tom said, trying to get something out of her. "You listen to me. There will be no public women or gypsies in my apartment." She put her hand out. "What are you talking about?" The boy turned to Susie. She was crying. "What I see is what I say." The woman couldn't keep quiet. "Then I'll go with her," Tom said proudly. "You can expect no more money from us." The mother was adamant. "Don't." He took Susanna's hand and they left the apartment. "Tom, don't be like that. Stay." The girl stopped him at the entrance. "That I will not leave you. I love you. We'll live somehow." He was at it with Catherine. They drove back to their apartment. It was paid for before the end of the month. There they both separated. She to the kitchen and he to his room. It wasn't easy. "I'm sorry about her." Tom came to Susie. "What are you apologizing for?" She was surprised. "For her, I think, what has become of my mother, who was always a good person. Now this money has really spoiled her. You saw the way she looked at us, and not just you, but me too. It brought back memories of the time when my mother would run after my father in tears, bring him back. I needed a son back then. Calm down. Susie put her palm to his cheek, as she always did. The next day, the girl went out on business, and Tom couldn't stand it. He went to the store, bought alcohol, didn't go out, stayed home. He did not understand how they would live on. School was coming to an end, nothing concrete about a job, where to get money, how to pay the rent, and everything else. What's up? Susie came home to find Tom drunk. I'm sorry, he apologized again. No, that's not the way to do it. You'll only make things worse. She lifted him up and put his head in her lap. The month is ending and we have no money to pay the rent, he mumbled. It's okay, we'll figure something out. She had a knack for that. But there was nothing to think of. There was no money. Then Tom said that they would stay at his friend's house for the time being. Wouldn't we embarrass him? Said Susie, worried. I think not. Tom was not in it who Catherine. The friend was a jolly fellow. He liked to go out for a drink and then sit and talk for a long time. Susie liked all that at first, but when it started to happen every day, she decided to talk to Tom. You're not going to be like him. She was not only worried about his physical health, but his emotional health as well. Calm down. It's okay. If you don't stop, I'll leave, the girl said seriously. So it's okay though. Tom looked at her and smirked. While you're in this state, you're doing fine, and then it's going to be bad. She was who Catherine about it. Oh, what are you talking about? He wanted to hug her, but Suzanne prevented him from doing so. Tom didn't heed the girl's words. He didn't change a thing. They were still having fun and drinking with a friend. When Tom saw her packing, he tensed up. Where are you going? He asked Susie. I'm going out. She was crying. Wait, everything will get better. He was in it, you Catherine. Tom drove to his parents' house. He wanted to apologize, tell them everything would be all right, and ask them for money again. Show up, his father said when he opened the door for him. Mom, Dad, help me, she might leave for good. Give her money to rent an apartment, he pleaded. Tom, if she leaves on her own now, believe me, it will only be better. Demi looked at the young man. You don't understand, I love her, he almost cried. Well, love will pass, you will love another, said the woman. No, you don't understand anything about it. The son was already crying. And if I tell you that we'll buy you an apartment if you leave her. The mother went on a trick to sell her love for an apartment. He looked up at her. Why, that's not a bad option. She smirked. You're callous. You have no heart, Tom said. Tom left, but he didn't go to Susie's place. He went to his childhood friends. There was alcohol again, talking and everything else. In the morning, the boy showed up at his parents' house again. I agree. He sat down in front of his mother in the kitchen. That's good. You can see my son. She took his hand. What are you talking about? Father came in. Tom agreed to the apartment. You don't have to explain the rest. But you can look out for options then. Mike was smiling. Tom was feeling guilty right now. He realized that he had just abandoned his love for some apartment. How to live with that now? But he couldn't do otherwise. Suzanne would have left him anyway. There was no money to be had. Son, look, they came to a high-rise building. Where? Let's at least go into the entrance, he asked them. The apartment was one room, very cozy. The young man immediately took a liking to it. He stood in the room, went through the bathroom. Well, his parents were waiting for him. I like it, the son smiled. Then it is decided, tomorrow you move in. His father approached him. Tom stopped thinking about Susie. He realized now that she was away for the pageant, but when she came back, he could bring her here. Her parents don't go that often. They wouldn't recognize her. We're visiting. Demi and Mike came, after the guy had checked into the new apartment. Come on in. Tom wasn't ready for this. The parents came in, and the girl came in after them as well. Hi. She smiled at the young man. Come on in. He wasn't expecting this. Tom, meet Catherine. She is the daughter of a good woman. Demi started talking right away. Okay, nice to meet you, Catherine. I'm Tom. He shook her hand. They walked into the room. There was hardly anything there yet. A table had been brought in from the kitchen. They sat down on the couch. And I liked you right away, the girl began to say in a thin voice. Uh-huh. The boy was kind of disgusted. He realized that his parents had come to him for a reason, to match him, but he didn't need anyone. "Why do you talk to Catherine like that?" was displeased with the mother. "As I want, so I talk." Tom answered her in the same tone. "I don't understand anything. We try to make things better for him, and he is always dissatisfied." She stood up. "What's better? Forcing some girl on me when I've got the one I love." He wasn't shying away from anyone. "What's it got to do with me at all?" The girl jumped to her feet. "You have nothing to do with anything. You're just a victim of circumstances." The guy turned toward her. "Mike, we're leaving." Demi went to the door. The father looked at his son. It was unclear whether he supported his wife or not. "And what are you sitting for?" The guy turned to the girl when the door slammed behind the parents. "I liked you. I wanted to talk to you. I thought you would be different without them." She was nape and not smart. At least that's what Tom thought. "And I don't like you," he said into her eyes. "And I'll make you change your mind." She was at her wit's end. All right, try it. He even wondered what she would do. Catherine was a very cunning girl. To get herself a normal guy with money, she was willing to do anything. The next day, she was at Tom's house again. She came with a bottle of good liquor. "Come on," the guy raised his glass. "To us." Catherine was pretty. "Yeah," he nodded and drank. After that, Catherine began to dance quietly. Tom didn't realize how they ended up in bed. "You are so passionate," she whispered. "You too," the guy simply answered her. In the morning, he opened his eyes, remembered what had happened yesterday, grabbed his head. What had he done? "Hello," she turned to him. "Why?" He cringed, his head hurt. "Why what? I didn't force you. You did it yourself," she said in a hurt voice. "All right, let's get up." He had already accepted what he had done. She got up and as she went to the kitchen. That turned the guy on. Susie never did that. When he entered the kitchen, she was already standing there with 2 cups of coffee. Her body was so seductive that the young man couldn't resist. He picked her up in his arms and carried her back to bed. "And you say you don't like me?" She lay on his chest. "Come on, you're using forbidden techniques. Maybe we go to your parents and say that together, and you will also apologize because hurt your mother yesterday," suggested to him Catherine. "Yes, but not today." He agreed with the girl. He was so used to her, or rather he couldn't resist when he saw her body. Then he didn't think of anyone else. "Okay." She turned to him and gave him an enticing look. "What are you doing to me?" Tom groaned. "I love it." She walked over to him. "Okay, let's go to Mom's." He was willing to do anything, or they would have spent half a day in bed again. "It's us." Tom walked into his parents' apartment. "Who's us?" He heard his mother speak indignantly and walked towards them. She stepped out into the hallways, splashing her hands. "Catherine, how unexpected. Come in." She waited until the young ones took off their shoes and passed into the hall. "Yes, we're together with Tom now," she smiled at Demi. "I'm so glad of that." Mother ran to the kitchen. Catherine helped her. They quickly set the table, sat down. The conversation was about everything, but on neutral topics. "And how did you do it?" Demi asked. She looked at her son. "That's it. Catherine showed me in all her glory." He spoke the truth. That was commendable. It was obvious that the mother was pleased. From that moment, Tom and Catherine began to live together. As the boy expected, his father took him to work. There was already more than one of their store in town, so there was a lot of business. Tom did his best not to let his father down. Often he saw gypsies at this time, always remembered Susie, but now he thought that it was not worth interfering in her life. "Will you propose to me at some point?" Catherine asked him directly. When the time is right, he remembered how he had promised Susie to buy a ring. "Okay, I'll wait." Catherine also worked for the young man's parents. They only got along well when they were in bed. The rest of the time she annoyed Tom. He didn't understand how he could tie his life to her. And so the children, Demi glared at them when they were visiting. "When's the offer coming?" "Mom, we'll figure it out on our own somehow." Tom wanted to avoid the subject. Not even 6 months passed, as the guy has already given Catherine a ring. He himself came to this decision. No one pushed him, so he thought. "I'm so happy." Catherine hugged her future husband. Preparations for the wedding were in full swing. Demi and her friend, who was Catherine's mother, did everything. "Where are we going to get a dress?" Joan asked. "Don't worry, Mike will go and get everything," assured Demi. "Aren't the grandmothers coming to the wedding?" said Tom, surprised when he saw the invitation. Mom's not feeling well, and Margaret's with her. Mother didn't even look up. Then we'll go to them ourselves, said Tom firmly. Suit yourself, but it has to be done now. Demi was calling the shots. Catherine, you're coming with me, he called to his fiancée. Of course, she was ready to go with him to the end of the world. So off they went. Joan was really sick, but not sick enough to be assigned a nurse. Hello, they hugged. Who's that? Margaret glared at Catherine. My fiancé, said the grandson. I see she didn't accept him, she realized. Don't remind me about Susie. Tom became sad at once. All right, come in. This time they were at her house. Catherine sat silent practically the whole time. She was afraid to say a word. Why are we silent? Margaret looked at her. I don't know what to say. The girl began to clasp her fingers. There is no need to be shy. Our grandson's fiancée will be a granddaughter for us. The woman tried to speak without teasing. No need, bah, said Tom. Well, whoever the grandson chooses, we'll accept. Margaret already knew that nothing good would come of it. Why aren't you going to the wedding? Ask the question that had brought the young man here. Ask your mother, Margaret said resentfully. All right, that's what I thought. Then we'll celebrate it here too. How are you? He turned to Catherine. Okay, but only after we do everything in town, she agreed. The grandmothers saw their grandchildren off the next day. Bless you, they both crossed the boys. The dress was bought, the restaurant was booked, the guests were invited. All that remained was for the young people to go to the registry office. It's not a difficult thing to do. When the young people came out with a certificate of marriage, everyone began to shout, Congratulations! The holiday was fun, except that Tom sat drinking glass after glass and was bored. Closer to nightfall, they went home. The young man just came in and immediately collapsed on the bed and fell asleep. Tom, what about the first wedding night? Said offended Catherine. But he was already snoring. Well, that's fine. She stomped her foot and went to the kitchen. The girl had very big plans for this man. Not 2 months later, the new wife announced her pregnancy. Why was there such a rush? Demi asked her. As it happened, shrugged his shoulders Catherine. Son, are you glad you're going to be a daddy soon? His mother asked him. It was both sarcasm and at the same time no, he really wanted children, but not from this girl. Family life was no good. Catherine was always out of the house, disappearing somewhere. Where are you going? You'll be at a bellyache, Tom shouted in the evening. Why are you yelling like that? She didn't let him get away with it. Okay, I'm sorry, you were slowing down. Where have you been? Can you explain? He said calmly. It's none of your business, was all she said. Are you cheating on me pregnant? He asked. What are you saying? The girl made big eyes. I can see your eyes are shining. Tom waved at her and left. After such behavior of his wife in the apartment did not want to stay in the apartment, and he again went to a friend. It was fun. It was the 7th month of pregnancy, but Catherine could not walk normally, not lying down. Everything pissed her off. Her husband couldn't bear to see it. He went to his friend's house again and again. Once there he met a girl. She was sitting on the windowsill and shook her head to the beat. That she liked the music. Tom approached her. Yes, she turned around. The guy saw those eyes and couldn't resist. He immediately remembered the one he had loved for so long and so much. What's your name? He asked. Jay-Z, she said. You have such beautiful eyes, he complimented her. Thank you, you're nice too. All the while the girl smiled, dimples appearing on her cheeks. Who's that? Tom came up to his friend. This is Jessie. She's new in our town. A mutual acquaintance introduced her, and today she came, he answered. She's beautiful. Tom couldn't help saying that. Did you talk to her? The landlord asked. A little, Tom said honestly. But she's cool, he went to the others. Tom wanted Jizzy to come to him, but she was still sitting on the windowsill. Then he made up his mind and came over himself. Let's go for a walk, he suggested. We could, she shrugged. They went down to the courtyard, walked a little, and then returned to the gazebo. I've never been like this before, he told her. What? She didn't understand. I saw your eyes and I fell in love. He was being honest. I see, she laughed. They talked until the morning. Jesse told her where she lived. Tom promised to pick her up tomorrow. The guy came home. even though he really didn't want to. Catherine was asleep. Tom walked to the kitchen, made himself some tea. He didn't want to lie down. He had to get up for work in a couple of hours. All the time he was thinking about his new acquaintance. In the evening, Tom arrived at Jessie's house. She came out and got into his car. "How are you?" "I'm okay. Tell me about yourself," she asked him. "What's there to tell? Didn't you already know?" He didn't turn around. "About being married," she guessed. "Yes," he confirmed. "Yes," he confirmed. "And I want to tell you right away that we'll be friends only." Right away, she set the record straight. "Okay, I hear you." It wasn't the first time he regretted marrying Catherine. Since then, Tom and Jessie had begun to communicate, but only as friends. But now Tom could tell this girl everything. They talked every day. The young man would pick her up. In the evening, they drove to the outskirts of the city and just talked. She knew everything. About Susie, whom Tom loved so much. About Catherine, with whom there was only a physical connection, and everything else. Tom came home, heard his wife screaming. "What's wrong?" He ran into the room. "Call an ambulance." She was lying on the bed, writhing. "But it's still early. The term is not soon." He was surprised. "Call it," screamed the girl. Tom ran to the phone, dialed the number of the ambulance. Catherine was taken to the hospital. "And what did they say?" Demi asked when Tom called her. "That labor has begun," said the son, confused. "It's so early," the mother didn't understand. "That's what I said." There was silence on the other end. "Why didn't you say anything?" Tom repeated twice. "All right, tomorrow we'll go to the hospital," Demi finally said. Tom felt like seeing Jessie again. He decided to drive to her. If she came out, they'd talk, and if she didn't, it had to be. "You just left," she came out to him. "Catherine went to the hospital in an ambulance, so I thought I'd spend a little time with you." He never lied to her or lied to her. Okay. She got in the front seat. It had been hours since they'd talked enough. "How can you talk so much?" she asked him and laughed. "If a person is interesting, why not talk?" He put his arm around her. "Don't." She pulled her hands away. Of course, he was afraid she would stop talking to him. He should have gone home, but he didn't want to. "You shouldn't go home. You should go to the hospital," the girl told him. "Yeah, you're right," he nodded. After Tom drove Jez at home, he drove straight to the hospital where his wife was in labor. Tom thought that premature babies were then placed somewhere or taken away. He didn't exactly know anything about it, but he heard about it. "How is she?" He asked the doctor who was standing on the porch. "She's fine." "You're the father?" he asked. "Yeah, did something happen?" Tom was getting nervous. "Not yet, but maybe the doctor was speaking in riddles." "Speak directly," the young man asked. "I can't yet." He looked Tom in the eye and walked back to the ward. The young man went back to the car. He couldn't get in. He was tapping his fingers on the dashboard of the car. In the morning, Demi arrived. "So, how is Catherine?" she asked. "I do not know. They say that it is fine, but something is not right there," said the son nervously to his mother. "What are you talking about?" The woman furrowed her eyebrows. "I don't know myself," he shrugged. The only thing to do was to wait. When the head of the gynecology department came to work, he came in, but left the building a few minutes later. "Are you Tom?" He came to the car. "Yeah, I was getting a little nervous." "Come with me." A man in a bathrobe beckoned him to follow them. "And I'm his mother." "Can I come with you?" Demi asked. "Yes, come in." He closed the door behind them and led them into his office. "Explain what happened." Tom almost shouted as they walked up the stairs. "Was your wife cheating on you?" They stopped in a flight of stairs at a window. "What?" The young man didn't understand. A difficult question. The doctor waited. "I cannot answer it." Tom turned to his mother. "Why such questions?" She twitched too. "Let's go to the office. I'll tell you everything there." He invited them. The woman and the young man came in and sat down on the chairs. "Would you like to see your son?" the doctor asked them. "Yes." Tom nodded affirmatively. Now, he did not even get up from the chair. "Don't premature babies lie in special boxes?" the woman asked. "Is it your baby premature?" He turned surprised at her. Of course, the contraction started in the 7th month. Demi was a little silent because she understood roughly what she was going to talk about. "You believe yourself," the doctor grinned. "All right, let's go to the baby." Tom couldn't stand it. Let's go, led them to the superintendent along the corridor. They entered the room where there was only one baby. Is that him? Demi asked. Yes, this is your son and your grandson. Waited for them to approach. Tom approached. When he saw the boy, his eyes opened wide. The child had dark skin. That's not my son, he said and stepped away from the crib. Your wife said as much and wrote a child relinquishment form. Although, as you can see for yourself, she was the only one who gave birth today. We couldn't even switch if we wanted to. He spread his hands. What's going on? Demi clutched her head. I see. Tom left the room. What you don't understand? The mother ran out after him. You don't understand. He looked at her with contempt. You're going to accuse me now, she cried. And who brought her to me? Tom was angry. All right, I agree. But what to do? Now we'll what? Give the child to an orphanage, cried Demi. No, if she wrote a waiver, I didn't write it. I watched that baby grow in her belly, and the parent is not the one who gave birth, but the one who brought it up. Indignant young man. All this they told the doctor. After that, Demi went to Catherine. She was lying, turned away from the wall. How could this happen? The woman entered the room. I refused him, said the girl. And Tom did not, said calmly and sat down by the bedside. How? Catherine turned around. That's how I have it, smiled Demi. So he and I are still together. Catherine could not believe it. It turns out so, not a mother-in-law. I'm sorry, I didn't think it could happen like this. The girl cried. It's all right, as Tom said, there are no other people's children. They hugged each other. All the problems with the documents were solved. Catherine took the waiver. After that, Tom had no time left for work or for communication with Jizzy. He was busy with the baby. They decided to name him John. Where are you going? Tom looked out of the room. Catherine was dressed and wearing makeup as if she were going to a dance. I was going to meet the girls. She glared at him. That I have to sit with John 24 hours a day and you're with the girls. That's not right. He walked out into the hallway. Who needs him, your kid? You wanted to babysit yourself. She defiantly turned around and left the apartment. Tom's hands were dropping. He called Jizzy. Oh, he's so good, said the girl and took the baby in her arms. Yes, Tom was glad that she was so gentle with the boy. Jizzy often could not come, but occasionally still dropped by. Catherine, on the other hand, didn't think about her family at all. She began to disappear, could be absent at night, or even 3 days in a row. Her husband didn't pay attention to it anymore. All this time was occupied by his son, whom he loved so much that closer and more dear to no one was not. When John was 3 years old and he and his father were on the playground, Catherine showed up. Oh, the prodigal mother has returned. Tom looked at her. Give me my son, she asked. What? I don't understand. I'm leaving you for John's real daddy. She took the child in her arms and went. Wait, why do you need him? At first was not needed. What happened now? The young man ran after her. When I found out I was pregnant, Michael didn't know about it and I didn't bother to find him. A few months ago, we got together. He said he loved me and missed me. I told him about John. He made it a condition that he would take me with him if I took my son. She was walking and crying. You realize he's used to me and I'm used to him, Tom pleaded with her. That's it, you can file for divorce yourself. She stopped and turned to her husband. Don't be silly, leave the baby. He didn't want to attract people's attention. You're nothing to him. She turned her back to him again and walked away. Tom looked at her and realized that for the second time in his life, the most precious thing in his life was being taken away from him. He didn't know what to do, how to act. And if they didn't want John again and they put him in an orphanage. Tears stung his eyes. Tom went into the house and got a bottle. It was the only way he knew how to forget everything. Tom, what are you doing? Jessie came to him because she couldn't get through. Go away, don't look at me like that. He didn't want the girl to see it all. What are you doing to yourself? You're still young. And she's right about John being nothing to you. She leaned over him. Jesse, please go away, he pleaded. All right, if I leave now, I won't come back. She was relentless. Okay, he nodded. Tom could only walk to the store. There he would buy an unpretentious snack and a bottle. Once a friend came to see him, and after that he didn't leave the house for days. Jeezy realized that she had to help the man out, but she knew she wouldn't get anywhere. So she went to Tom's parents. Hello, she looked at Demi. Who are you? The woman couldn't recognize her. I'm a friend of your son. He's not well, said Jeezy. Yes, my husband said he hasn't been to work for a few days. Demi got worried. She and Mike drove over to her son's house. The mother couldn't understand what could have happened now. They rarely talked to each other. About the fact that Catherine was walking away from him, Tom did not tell his parents. Jesus, Tom, how could this be? Demi went into the apartment. There was a disgusting odor. The young man himself was lying on the floor. Get away, he shouted. No, you're coming with us. The mother and father dragged her son outside, put him in the car, and drove home. Stop it. The mother tried to take the bottle from Tom's hands. Get away, he was swinging at Demi. I'll put you in the hospital, she threatened. I'll put you in a grave, he started to cry. Son, what's happening to you? The woman, exhausted, sat down on a chair. Nothing, I want to die, Tom said to his mother. Calm down, sweetie. Demi would come over and put her arms around his head. Get away from me. He'd shove his mom away. You've ruined my whole life. All right, think of it this way. The woman didn't know what to do. They sat in the kitchen, Demi cooking and Tom drinking again. Suddenly he looked up. Turn up the TV, he shouted. What, didn't his mother expect him to ask her to do just that? Turn up the sound. Tom yelled even harder. Okay. She did as her son asked. Susie is mine. Tom smiled. Demi looked at the image on the screen. Of course, she saw the resemblance to the girl who had come to them once, but now she was well dressed, with normal makeup. Susie was brought up in an orphanage, the announcer said, but she was diligent and eager to get ahead. After winning a famous modeling contest, she received the grand prize. Half of the girl gave to charity, found her relatives, and on the other half opened her own salon. Now it is a network, so the girl is known not only in Europe, but also outside. Is that her? Mom couldn't believe what she gave up. Yes, the girl I picked up on the panel, said, somehow moving his tongue, the son. Wow. Demi bit her lip. But as they say, the elbow is close, but you can't bite it. She didn't say anything more to her son. She realized to herself that she was wrong. How could she dispose of other people's lives? She had ended up ruining the life of not just anyone, but her only son. She looked pityingly at Tom, but what to do, she didn't know. Son, stop. Tom's mother asked him in the morning when he went to the fridge to drink again. Leave me alone. That word was stuck in his head. The doorbell rang. His mother went to open the door. There was Jessie standing on the doorstep. What do you want? I told you not to come. Tom saw her. There are guests here to see you, she said. Who the hell is Catherine? Get her out of here. She took my son away from me. He raised his voice so he could hear her from outside the door. No. Jessie opened the door and Suzanne came in. What? He knelt down in front of her. The man you've become, she repeated his mother's words. Forgive me, I've always loved only you. He buried himself in her lap and cried. Stan, go and wash yourself, I'll wait for you here. She took his hand. He got up, did everything the girl asked, and in a few minutes a wrinkled, but still the same Tom in love with her, was sitting in the kitchen. I came to get you, Suzanne smiled. I can't. You become like this. Tom looked at her. It's all because of you, she spoke calmly. I don't understand. He was actually surprised. Then, when I had to go to the finals, I didn't tell you because I had a condition. No relatives or connections. I decided I cared more about you than some contest. I was about to cancel, and then you left. I thought it was fate. She put her palm to his cheek. Tom closed his eyes. Oh my God, what have I done? The mother cried and came to the girl. Forgive me, children, I'll never interfere again. It's all right. Susie smiled at her too. And now what? How you found me? He wanted to know everything. Jessie, she pointed at the girl. I don't understand. Tom was in a stupor. When I started looking for siblings, it turned out that Jessie was my sister, and we didn't even know about each other. When we got to talking, I told her about you, and she told me she'd heard that story before. And recently she told me a scary story that happened with you and John. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time, but I've never had the chance. Now I've decided to get my life back on track. She exhaled. Jessie, I underestimated you. Tom told her. Thank you. The girl smiled. Let's go. Susanna waited for his answer. Where? He wasn't quite out of it yet. Anywhere. She was happy to meet Tom. If you still love me, of course. Of course I love you more than life itself. Susie, will you ever forgive me? He took her hands. I forgave you a long time ago. They left the apartment. Demi saw them off in silence, afraid to say anything lest she scare away the good fortune that had come to her son. They drove to Tom's house. There they had to put things in order. After that, they had to file for divorce. When everything was done, Tom, Jesse, and Suzanne were sitting in a restaurant. Wine? Susie asked. No, that's it, I'm not anymore. Tom laughed. I was joking, I wanted to test you, admitted the girl. What are you going to do? Jesse asked him a question. Susie, will you agree to live with me? After all, you have everything now, you can also refuse. He looked at her and held her hand. Let's talk. We haven't seen each other in so many years. We'll see, she replied. But he was happy to have her sitting right here next to him. Why don't we go for a vacation? It was Jesse's suggestion again. I know where we could go. Susie suddenly brightened up. Where would we go? Tom was expecting her to talk about the sea. We'll go to your grandmother's in the country. She'd been looking forward to it. It's true, I haven't been there for a long time. The young man agreed with her. They packed up and the next day they were there. I couldn't believe my eyes. They entered Margaret's house. Hello, laughed the girl. My dear, how worried I was about you. They hugged each other. But how? It had been so many years. And the children told her the story, everything from beginning to end. So your mother has calmed down, realized that she was wrong. The woman folded her hands on her chest. I think she did. Tom hoped so. They sat at the table for a long time, then went to see Joan's grandmother. She was sick. It's beautiful here, Jesse said as they walked around the neighborhood. Yes, that's why I came back here. Susie looked at her. Susie and Tom decided to spend the night in the hayloft. They talked about everything. It seemed like the stories that were with them would never end. You will be with me again. Believe me, in so many years I've learned and realized everything. He held her hand. If you promise that you will always be there for me and never leave me, she looked into his eyes. I swear I'll always be there for you. Tom whispered this in Susie's ear. In the morning they told their grandmother that as soon as they were going to get married, they would definitely do it here. After that, the young people went back to Tom's parents' house. You don't have déjà vu? Susie asked the young man. He only laughed in response. Today, Demi greeted Suzanne as if she were the dearest guest. As soon as Catherine and I are divorced, I will propose to Susie, Tom told his parents. And we're very excited about it. Demi was still feeling some embarrassment for her mistakes. And so the long-awaited day arrived. Susie in a beautiful dress, Tom in a suit. He picked her up, and they drove to the registry office. They had Jesse and Tom's friend with them, and no one else was needed. And immediately after the wedding, the young family went to their grandmother's in the village, as promised. You weren't going to invite us. Demi and Mike were already there. To be honest, I thought you were in a fight with your grandmother, Tom said. There was that, but I came over, apologized, went over and gave her Margaret a hug. The tables were set. Those who wanted a treat came. No one was turned away. This should have happened years ago, Tom whispered to Raid. We would have been different then. She kissed him. I love you, he whispered to her. And you're going to be a daddy soon. Susanna laughed. What? The boy jumped up from the table and started running around yelling. Son, sit down. Demi tried to grab his jacket. Mom, my Susie's pregnant, he shouted to the whole village. The woman looked at the girl. She couldn't understand how. She couldn't see her to begin with. She stood up and walked over to her. Daughter, forgive me if you can. I wish you happiness. I see how you love each other, and I am very bitter that I was not willing to see it before. Live in love and harmony, and your father and I will always help you.